Cole Whitmore didn't believe in fate. He believed in timelines, clean contracts, and results that came from structure. That belief had built him a multi-million-dollar portfolio by 37 historical restorations, museum partnerships, and nearly every Victorian mansion worth owning in Savannah now bore his company's mark. On paper, he was enviable. Handsome in a way that was more refined than rugged wealthy, without flash polite, but impenetrable. He had it all, and he'd never felt more caged. The early evening sun leaked through the blinds of his office, casting long golden stripes across the mahogany table. A bourbon sat untouched beside him. His phone buzzed again. He let it. Whatever his cousin Caleb had to say could wait. The merger was done. The papers were being finalized. And as of 5 hours ago, the Whitmore board had made it clear either Cole agreed to a very specific clause, or he lost the company his grandfather had spent half a century building. He braced both hands on the edge of his desk. "Married?" he muttered. The word didn't even sound real. A knock at the door. "Come in," he said, voice flat. Asa Whitmore entered slowly with the help of his cane, silver hair, slicked back eyes, sharp as ever. He didn't look like a man who should still hold power, but he did. Cole had never known anyone to command silence in a room with such ease. Not even death had dared challenge him yet. Asa closed the door behind him. So he said, "What'll it be?" Cole didn't answer right away. "I've spent 15 years making Whitmore Properties what it is. I didn't take shortcuts. I didn't make excuses. Now you're telling me the future of the company hinges on marriage." Asa walked to the window slowly, his cane tapping rhythmically against the hardwood. "You know our investors. They believe in legacy, continuity, family. You've proven you can lead. Now they want proof you can settle." Cole laughed dryly. "You mean pretend to fall in love?" No one asked for love, just optics. Asa turned to face him. "The Langley family has name recognition, and they're willing. Their daughter is educated, well-spoken, and comes from a line just southern enough to make the society pages smile. It's a clean solution." "You mean a contract with a person in it?" Cole snapped. "I don't even know her name." "She's asked to remain private until the ceremony," her mother insisted. "Of course she did." Asa stepped closer, voice softening. "Look, I know how it sounds. But this isn't about romance. It's about preserving what matters. I built this company. You expanded it. But it will take both our names, yours and hers, to keep it." Cole stared at the file on his desk. The first page bore the title, Preliminary Marital Agreement. 5 conditions ironclad. No physical obligation. No interference in personal matters. A minimum of 5 joint appearances in 12 months. Total confidentiality. 1-year duration. A transaction. A merger masked as matrimony. He sat back, jaw tight. "And if I don't sign, you lose controlling interest. Caleb's been circling. The board won't wait forever." Silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Wire, Cole asked. Asa exhaled. "She's quiet. Private. Doesn't like the spotlight. But she's loyal. Her family's legacy is tied to the Savannah Art Society. She wants to preserve it. You want to preserve this. Mutual benefit." Cole opened the folder. The pen felt heavier than usual. He held it for a beat, then scribbled his name across the bottom. Not because he believed in the deal, but because walking away would mean losing everything he'd spent his life building. "I'll go through with it," he said. "But don't expect me to pretend it means something." Asa nodded once. No one expects anything more. But something in his tone made Cole pause. A flicker of something unreadable passed behind the old man's eyes. Regret, maybe, or guilt. By the time Asa left, The sun had dipped behind the rooftops, casting the room in a soft, amber hush. Cole remained at his desk, staring at the folder. Across the city in a quiet room above a fading museum, Margot Langley stood in front of a mirror she'd inherited from her grandmother. The dress she wore wasn't a wedding gown, just a pale cream silk piece she'd owned for years. Simple, understated. She liked things that didn't ask for attention. Her mother's voice called from downstairs. "Margot, the lawyer needs one more signature." "I'm coming," she replied gently, adjusting the clip in her hair. She stared at her reflection. 32. No scandals, no dating history worth gossiping over, raised on paintings, poetry, and preservation. Her world was quiet, still. Until the debt letters came, until the medical bills piled up, until Josephine Langley, her mother, her entire world whispered, "We might lose everything." So when the proposal came not of romance but of alliance, Margot didn't argue. She'd signed before she let herself think too hard. She had only one request: anonymity until the ceremony. Not out of shame, out of fear of being seen as a burden, a transaction, a solution. Back in his penthouse, Cole walked to the glass wall that overlooked the city. Savannah shimmered in the distance, soft gold under twilight. He pressed his hand to the glass. A marriage without love, a union without connection. And yet, beneath his cynicism, something stirred. A quiet ache, a memory he couldn't place, not of a woman, but of a moment years ago. Rain, a stranger's kindness, a voice that said, "You're not alone." He shook it off. This wasn't that. This was strategy. Yet, far beneath his logic, beneath his armor, something whispered. What if this isn't the end of the story? What if it's the beginning? And he had no idea. That the veil hiding his bride would drop more than lace. It would drop every wall he had ever built. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The garden behind the Langley Museum still held on to the last blush of spring. Dogwoods bloomed in clusters, their petals drifting like secrets across the brick path, where Margot walked barefoot, robe fluttering lightly around her ankles. Morning light slipped through the trellises in soft waves, but it did nothing to ease the heaviness pressing behind her ribs. She had barely slept. Not because of nerves, Margot didn't allow herself those, but because every hour felt borrowed. Borrowed from a life she had never quite been able to claim as her own. From the open French doors behind her, her mother's voice reached out. Calm, controlled, always composed. "Margot, darling, they're arriving in an hour." Margot turned, squinting back at the house. "Do I have to be there?" "You don't have to speak, just be seen." That was worse somehow. The merger announcement wasn't public, not yet. But people talked. Donors asked questions. Museum board members whispered. And today's luncheon, though casual in theory, was clearly a test. The Whitmore family had sent over 2 PR managers, 1 legal rep, and Margot's heart caught slightly Cole's cousin Caleb Whitmore. She didn't know him. She didn't know Cole either. Just his name. His signature on the contract. And the way her mother's voice, always lowered when she spoke of the Whitmores like their last name, carried the weight of a verdict. Inside, Josephine stood at the kitchen island, calmly slicing peaches into a porcelain bowl. Her pearls were already clasped, her lipstick flawless. She always dressed like they were seconds from losing everything, as if the only armor left was elegance. Margot stepped in, hugging herself against the sudden air conditioning. "Mother, I've agreed to everything you asked. The least you could do is stop pretending this is normal." Josephine didn't look up. "I'm not pretending. I'm protecting." By marrying me off to a stranger, Josephine's hands slowed. Her shoulders softened. By giving you a chance to be more than collateral damage in this life. Margot closed her eyes. The air between them held years of unspoken things. Her father's failed exhibitions, the unpaid taxes, the donors who stopped calling, and Josephine's diagnosis delivered 2 months ago like a passing inconvenience even as the medical bills quietly stacked like dominoes. "This isn't what I imagined for you," Josephine said, finally her voice thin. "But you're not a child." "You said yes." Margot opened her mouth to reply, but stopped. Because it was true. She had said yes. She had signed. She had agreed to marry a man she'd never seen, let alone spoken to. Not for love, not for dreams, but because someone had to hold the walls up while they crumbled. Later that afternoon, the museum's central salon buzzed with polite conversation. Sunlight spilled through tall windows, catching dust motes in midair like suspended thoughts. The scent of roses and spiced tea lingered in the air. Margot stood near the back of the room, hidden behind a small display of antique frames, half listening as introductions floated toward her. "I'm Caleb Whitmore. It's a pleasure." His voice was easy, confident. He had the smile of a man who never had to guess whether he was wanted in a room. Margot watched from a distance as her mother greeted him with a handshake that belonged in a fundraiser. The conversation moved toward the fireplace, where 2 board members nodded attentively. Then Caleb's eyes flicked across the room and landed on her. His smile didn't change, but something about his posture did. He made his way toward her slowly, a glass of sparkling water in one hand. "You must be Margot," he said when he reached her. "I've heard very little, which means I've heard just enough." Her back straightened. "That's a clever way to introduce yourself." He grinned. "I try." There was a beat of silence. "You're different than I expected," he said. Margot tilted her head. "And how did you expect me flashier? Or quieter? I can't decide which. I'm sure the press will help you figure it out." A flicker of something passed behind his eyes, but he recovered quickly. "You're sharp. That'll come in handy. The Whitmore circle can be layered." Margot wasn't sure if it was a warning or an invitation. Caleb leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "You should know Cole doesn't like surprises or games. He's efficient, focused, not the type to make room for sentiment." Margot met his gaze evenly. "Neither am I." Caleb smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. "Well then," he said, tipping his glass toward hers. "This might be more interesting than I thought." She excused herself minutes later and slipped upstairs. Her room was too quiet. She sat at her writing desk and pulled open the top drawer, revealing the contract once more. Whitmore Langley Marital Agreement. She ran her fingers over the embossed lettering. 1 year. 5 appearances. No personal entanglement. She whispered the conditions aloud as if speaking them would make them less surreal. No one had told her anything about Cole beyond his reputation. He restored buildings, preserved heritage, built fortunes from forgotten brick. But who he was beyond his business profile, she had no idea. And maybe that was safer. From her window she could see part of the garden path, now empty, the guests gone. Except for one figure standing by the gate. Caleb. He hadn't left yet. He stood still, expression unreadable. Then slowly he turned and walked away. Margot watched until he disappeared behind the hedges. She wasn't sure what unnerved her more, the conversation, or the way he'd looked at her like he was reading a blueprint she hadn't meant to share. That night the museum echoed with silence. Margot sat alone in the upstairs hallway, knees pulled to her chest, her robe wrapped tight. Below her the house ticked and settled. Her mother had gone to bed hours ago. She whispered to the dark, "You've always done what's expected. Just once, couldn't you want something for yourself? No one answered. And in another part of Savannah, Cole stood on the rooftop of his building staring out over the skyline. He hadn't met her. He hadn't seen her face. But something kept tugging at the edge of his mind. A voice. A moment. He didn't believe in intuition, but he did believe in patterns. And this one didn't feel like business. It felt like the start of something he didn't have a name for. Not yet. The air in the conference room was too still, too clean, like no one dared disturb it. Cole leaned back in the leather chair, arms crossed, gaze pinned to the window. Below, Savannah moved at its usual unhurried pace. Carriages passed under oaks, tourists lingered over iced tea, and everything appeared calm. But inside the Whitmore boardroom, the ground was shifting. Caleb was speaking again, smooth, unbothered. It's simple, really. The optics line up. Langley's name gives us museum leverage, she gets financial stability, and Cole finally stops being the most eligible bachelor in the Southeast. Laughter rippled at the edges of the table. Cole didn't join in. I'm not interested in playing house, he said. No one's asking you to. Caleb glanced at him too quickly. It's a merger, not a honeymoon. Cole's jaw flexed. The board had already approved the contract. The marriage would go forward in 2-week ceremony, public statement, press rollout, and the first staged appearance at a historic preservation gala. Everything timed, everything choreographed, except the one variable no one could predict. Her. He still hadn't met her. She remained a name on a signature, a condition in a clause. But something about that bothered him more than he'd expected. When the meeting adjourned, Cole stayed behind, staring at the packet in front of him. Her signature was neat, angled slightly to the right. Confident but contained. He couldn't stop looking at it. An hour later, he stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the penthouse. By the time the doors slid shut, he realized he hadn't heard a word Caleb had said since the start of the meeting. Across town, Margot sat in the back of the museum's archive room, gloves on fingers gently brushing the surface of a century-old watercolor. She wasn't supposed to be working today, but she needed the silence, needed something to feel normal. The engagement had made it into whispers already. Donor circles, event coordinators, press liaisons. They all spoke in the same hushed tone, admiration, with a trace of disbelief. That girl with Cole Whitmore. Margot closed the archival binder gently and leaned back. She wasn't afraid of being judged. She was afraid of being misunderstood. There was a difference. A knock at the door startled her. It was Mira holding 2 coffees and a raised eyebrow. Please tell me you're not hiding back here again. I'm restoring inventory. You're avoiding reality. Margot sighed and took the coffee. It's quiet in here. That's the problem. The rest of the world's getting louder. Mira pulled up a stool. You're 2 weeks from marrying a man you've never met. You're about to be on every local magazine cover. You're the most talked about woman in Savannah and you haven't said a single word publicly. That's the point. Mira studied her. So, you're really doing this? Margot didn't answer right away. My mother needs care. The museum needs funding. The alternative was losing both. That's not love. No, but maybe it's something close. Sacrifice, I mean. Mira's eyes softened. You've always been good at giving things up. Maybe it's time someone gave something back. Margot looked down at her coffee. It's just a year, unless something changes. It won't. Mira stood, walked to the door, then paused. You know I met Cole once, at a gallery opening last year. He doesn't smile much. But he looked at the paintings like they meant something. Margot's chest tightened just a little. What kind of paintings? Old ones? Southern landscapes? Churches' courtyards, things that don't exist anymore. She left without another word. That night, Margot couldn't sleep. She walked the house barefoot, the floor creaking under familiar weight. The same hallway she'd grown up in, the same window she'd looked out of every Christmas Eve, every hurricane, warning every silent night when her parents argued in the parlor below. Now it was quiet. Too quiet. In her childhood bedroom, she opened the bottom drawer of her desk and pulled out a wooden box. Inside were photographs, her parents at the museum's opening, her father holding her at age 5 in front of a Monet reproduction. A candid shot of her and Mira sitting on the museum steps with smudged charcoal on their hands. She ran her thumb over the edges. What would Cole see when he looked at her? Would he see the girl in these photos or just a means to an end? She had no way of knowing. The next morning her mother entered the breakfast room, dressed in pale blue pearls fastened neatly at her neck. She was glowing. "The invitations are going out today," she said. "The Langley-Whitmore Union has a beautiful sound to it, doesn't it?" Margot looked up from her tea. "You're feeling better?" Josephine smiled faintly. "Good days and bad. Today's good. I want to write it." They sat in silence for a moment. Then her mother added almost too casually, Caleb Whitmore dropped off the event schedule. "You'll be doing your first appearance at the Restoration Gala downtown. Cole will escort you." Margot set her teacup down. "He still hasn't contacted me. He's busy. I'm not asking for roses, Mother. Just something." Josephine looked at her gently. "You'll meet at the rehearsal." That's how they wanted it. Some traditions are worth preserving. Margot stood pacing to the window. "This isn't a tradition, it's a transaction dressed in ceremony." Josephine's voice dropped. "You don't have to love it, Margot. You just have to survive it." Margot turned to her. "What if I want more than survival?" The question landed like a bell in a quiet church. Josephine blinked. "Then you better pray he does too." And in another part of the city, Cole stared at the veil design delivered to his penthouse by the event coordinator. Lace, ivory, timeless. He couldn't picture her face. But something about the veil unsettled him, because for the first time in years, he found himself wondering what it would feel like to lift it. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to know what was waiting underneath. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know if not comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The rehearsal was set for 5 o'clock sharp, but Cole arrived early. Not by design. He just needed space. The venue was an old estate-turned-event hall on the edge of Forsyth Park, all worn brick cast-iron railings and jasmine vines creeping across columns like whispered secrets. It was the kind of place he usually admired from a distance. But today, it felt like a stage. Inside, the staff were adjusting florals, clipping white roses into garlands that lined the aisle. The scent was soft, clinging to the air. Warm light filtered through the windows in long golden sheets, catching dust and movement like film. He took slow steps down the aisle, listening to the hollow echo of his shoes on the polished floor. It was quiet in a way that made thoughts louder. The coordinator appeared, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Whitmore, we're still waiting on her side. We can walk you through without the bride if that's all right." He gave a curt nod. "Let's just get it done." She smiled too brightly, the kind of smile that said she'd already dealt with too many egos today. "Of course." "The processional starts at the double doors. You'll walk in just after the officiant pause here at the altar." Cole barely heard the rest. His gaze caught on the empty chair rows. White linens, perfect bows, every detail pristine. Not one thing in this room felt real. Until a sound, soft, sudden, pulled his attention toward the back hallway. Quick footsteps. A woman's voice, almost a whisper. "Sorry, excuse me, She rounded the corner too fast, colliding gently with his shoulder. Cole caught his balance, stepping aside just in time. She froze. She was carrying a large cloth-wrapped box and breathing just slightly too fast. Her hair was swept up, a few loose strands trailing near her jaw. Her dress was pale linen, or silk maybe, and clung softly to her frame. Not formal, not flashy. Just graceful. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly, head still lowered. "I wasn't supposed to be in the main hall yet. I didn't mean to." "It's fine," he said, brushing his cuff. "No harm." She looked up then, just briefly. But it was enough. Her eyes were light, not cold, not fragile, just aware, as if she saw too much but had learned never to say so. And for a second, just one breath-long second, Cole felt a stillness he hadn't known he needed. She dipped her head. "I'll be out of your way." Then she slipped through a side door and vanished, the fabric of her dress trailing after her like a note unresolved. He stood there unmoving. The coordinator returned, mildly annoyed. "Mr. Whitmore." He looked at her. "Who was that?" She blinked. "Oh, I believe she's from the bride's preparation team. They requested a separate entrance. Privacy, you know." He nodded once. But his thoughts were elsewhere, because something about her voice. It stayed with him. That evening, Margot sat cross-legged on the floor of her mother's guest suite, smoothing out the edge of the veil. She'd chosen it herself, simple, with hand-sewn lace passed down from her grandmother's wedding. She hadn't worn it during the rehearsal. She couldn't. She hadn't expected to see him. He'd been taller than she imagined, and quieter. But it was the way he looked at her that unsettled her most, not like she was furniture or function, like she mattered even just for that second. She hadn't spoken her name, hadn't told him. Couldn't. Mira's voice rang in her head from the night before. He looked at paintings like they meant something. And Margot had felt that too. In the few seconds their eyes had met, she'd felt a pause, like the world took a breath. And yet he didn't know her. Not really. And she didn't know him. Only that they were two people standing in a house filled with curated beauty, about to walk into a union neither of them had chosen. She folded the veil carefully, then held it in her lap, like a question with no answer. Back in his penthouse, Cole stood at the piano he never played. The city flickered behind him through the glass walls, soft and distant. His mind wouldn't stop repeating it. "I'm sorry. I wasn't supposed to." Her voice wasn't rehearsed, not polished, it was real. The kind of real he hadn't felt in years. He didn't know who she was. But he had a strange, quiet suspicion that she wasn't just a woman in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was the bride. And somehow, he hoped he was right, even if he wasn't ready to admit it out loud. Not yet. The day of the wedding arrived with a silence that didn't belong. No birdsong, no distant traffic. Even the wind through the ivy-laced archways around the estate seemed to hold its breath. Cole stood alone in the groom's suite, already dressed, staring at his reflection like it might offer answers. His tie was perfect, his cuffs sat flush. Not a hair out of place. And still something felt off. He wasn't nervous. He didn't believe in that. He was something else. The assistant knocked softly before entering. "Mr. Whitmore, we're ready to begin. The photographer will take portraits at the altar before the guests are seated." Cole nodded, but didn't move. The assistant hesitated. "You'll walk in when the officiant cues the music. The bride will follow with her attendants." Then, the veil. That word again. Veil. He'd dreamt about it last night. Soft lace lifting into the light, a face he almost recognized, eyes that looked straight through his carefully constructed distance. He adjusted his collar and followed the assistant into the corridor. As he stepped into position behind the heavy double doors, he heard the quiet shuffling of chairs, the soft murmur of gathered guests. The event hall glowed with gold from overhead chandeliers, casting warmth on every white rose and candle flicker. This was a room built for show, but Cole wasn't here to perform. The music began, strings low and elegant. The officiant walked down the aisle first. Then the coordinator gave Cole a nod. He stepped forward. The air was thick but still. Guests rose quietly. Heads turned. He didn't scan the room, didn't look at the faces lining the aisle. He looked only forward toward the altar where vows would be exchanged between two people who didn't ask for this. Yet something had changed. He wanted to know her. He wanted her to know him. He reached the altar and stood still. His breath was measured, but just under the surface. Anticipation thrummed. Then came the quiet shift. The music deepened, softening into something almost reverent. The doors at the far end opened again. She appeared, and the world stopped moving. Two attendants carried the veil's edge behind her like ripples of light. The train floated softly against the floor as she walked slow, steady shoulders back. Her dress wasn't elaborate, but it was perfect. It held her like a secret, not a statement. She didn't look at anyone. Her head was bowed slightly, her face fully hidden behind layers of lace and tulle. But Cole didn't need to see her face. He knew. He knew by the way she moved, the way her hands were clasped tightly at her waist. The same hands that had clutched a box the day of the rehearsal. The same posture. The same breath. It was her, the woman in the hallway. She reached the altar and stopped just a few feet from him. The space between them felt both fragile and monumental. The officiant began to speak, but Cole barely registered the words. He could hear her breathing. She was nervous, not theatrical, real, honest. That soft, uneven inhale that spoke of someone who hadn't done this before, not like this. And without thinking, he lowered his voice and leaned slightly forward. "Take your time." She froze. Just a beat, barely a movement. But he saw it the way her shoulders stilled the air caught in her chest. Then slowly she nodded. It was the first thread. The first quiet knot tying them together, not by contract, but by something else. The officiant cleared his throat gently, glancing between them. And now, the veil. A shift moved through the room, a subtle rustle of curiosity. Cameras poised, guests leaned forward. The bride lifted her hands, slow, trembling. Then, a pause. Her right hand faltered. The satin glove slipped slightly from her fingers. Cole noticed. She was overwhelmed. And in that split second, something inside him did what years of discipline had trained him not to do. He moved, just one step closer, barely audible. He looked at her, not the veil, not the dress, her. And he said softly, "It's all right. You're safe." Her fingers stilled, her breath slowed. Then with care she lifted the lace. The veil rose gently, catching light, folding like memory until it revealed the face beneath. His breath left him. It was her, but not just the woman from the rehearsal. It was her, the woman who had knelt beside him on a rural road 3 years ago during a storm that swallowed everything. He had been stranded, disoriented, soaked, silent. And she had appeared out of nowhere. No umbrella, no questions, just a coat wrapped around his shoulders and a voice that said, "You don't have to explain." He had forgotten her name, but never her eyes. And now, she was standing in front of him, veil in hand, trembling and real and impossibly familiar. She looked up at him, and And she knew, too. "Hello, Cole," she whispered. His world tilted. He wasn't prepared for that voice again, or the way it carried something through him, something clean, something true. He didn't speak. Not yet. The officiant, sensing the shift, continued with the ceremony. But Cole didn't hear a word. He only saw her. And in that moment, the idea of a contract, of a business arrangement, of a transactional alliance, crumbled beneath the weight of something neither of them could name, because fate had no place in his life. And yet, here she was. Not a stranger. Not anymore. The reception hall was bathed in soft amber light, the kind that made even strangers look like memories. Strings played quietly in the corner. Champagne flutes clinked, laughter moved in gentle waves, and camera shutters clicked with polite discretion. Cole stood beside Margot near the edge of the crowd, their hands not touching their bodies, carefully aligned. To anyone watching, they looked composed, polished, perfect. But inside, something had shifted. Since the veil dropped, nothing felt the same. She had looked at him with recognition, not fear, not confusion, just quiet, breathless knowing. And then the ceremony continued, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Now here they stood side by side, but still miles apart, and every second stretched longer than it should. "Would you like something to drink?" Cole asked, breaking the silence between them. Margot glanced up at him. "Water's fine. Thank you." He nodded and disappeared into the crowd. She exhaled slowly. Her heels pinched, the neckline of her gown itched, and the knot in her stomach refused to loosen. The room was beautiful, the florals meticulous, the music timed to perfection, but she felt exposed like a painting hung too early in an unfinished gallery. People were watching, whispering. She could feel it. Behind her, 2 women near the dessert table leaned in. "She's lovely," one said. "Lovely, yes," the other replied, "but I wonder where she came from." I hadn't heard the name Langley in years. Margot turned away, face still calm, heart racing. From the far end of the room, Mira approached, threading through guests with effortless charm. "You're surviving," she said under her breath. Margot gave a half smile. "Barely. You looked radiant at the altar. I felt like a ghost." "Well," Mira replied, slipping a napkin-wrapped macaron into Margot's hand, "at least you're a well-fed ghost." Margot laughed softly. Then her gaze drifted toward the archway, where Cole had vanished. "Did he know?" she asked quietly. Mira followed her line of sight. "That it was you, no, but he does now." Margot's fingers curled slightly around the macaron. "I wish I'd said something," she whispered. "And what would you have said?" Mira asked gently. "That I wasn't part of a plan. That I never meant for it to be him." Mira looked at her, then gave her arm a light squeeze. "It's not too late to say something now." Before Margot could reply, Cole returned, offering her the glass of water. "Sorry. Bar's slow." "Thank you." Her voice was quiet. He didn't step away. Instead, he lingered. "I remember you," he said low enough only she could hear. "The road outside Charleston, 3 years ago." Margot's hand trembled slightly as she raised the glass. "You were hurt. No one had stopped. You didn't ask questions. You didn't offer answers." A pause, and then he said, "Why didn't you tell me it was you?" She looked at him, and for once she didn't try to mask the vulnerability in her voice. "I didn't think you'd want it to be me." He said nothing at first, just watched her. Then quietly, "I think I didn't know what I wanted, until today." Before either could say more, a group of guests approached 2 board members, an investor, and Cole's cousin Caleb. Caleb's smile was wide, performative. There they are. The stars of the night. Cole's expression shifted subtly. Guarded. Congratulations again, one of the investors said to Cole. Then turning to Margot, and you must be the woman who turned Savannah's most untouchable man into a groom. Margot smiled politely. Or maybe just the one who signed the same contract? The room chuckled lightly, but Caleb's eyes narrowed just for a second. She's got a sense of humor, he said too easily. Then he added, voice smooth, but a shade too loud, though I admit I was surprised to hear the name Langley. It's been a while since your family was in the spotlight. Margot's shoulders stiffened. Cole's jaw tightened. And yet Cole said calmly, here we are. The investor smiled, oblivious. We're all thrilled. It's a strong alliance. Legacy meets innovation. Margot felt like the conversation was happening 2 feet above her head. She smiled where she needed to, nodded when expected. But inside something twisted, not because they doubted her, but because she did. Caleb turned to her again, smiling too kindly. You'll find the Whitmore name opens a lot of doors. She met his gaze. And I intend to walk through them carefully. Cole cleared his throat. Excuse us. He placed a hand gently at the small of her back, not possessive, not forced. Just enough. They moved away from the group toward the French doors leading to the terrace. Once outside, under the sweep of string lights and soft breeze, Margot stepped into the cool air like it might save her. Cole spoke first. He shouldn't have said that. It's fine. No, it isn't. Margot looked out over the garden. Her voice was steady but soft. This is what I agreed to. Rooms full of people who don't know me, don't trust me, but will smile if I stay quiet. He was silent for a long moment. Then, you don't have to stay quiet with me. She turned slowly. Do you mean that? Yes. The lights reflected in her eyes and something inside him cracked. Not loud, just enough to make space for the truth. I didn't want this, she said. Not the cameras, not the performance, but I signed because my mother's health is failing, because the museum is barely staying open, because I thought maybe I could be useful. Cole stepped closer. You were never just useful. She blinked, stunned by the weight of his voice, the honesty in it. He looked at her like she was more than a bride in a dress, more than a condition in a contract. He looked at her like she was a person he wanted to know. For the first time that day, Margot breathed without trembling. They stood in silence as the reception moved behind them, and in that quiet corner of the terrace beneath the glow of paper lanterns and distant music, something fragile began to settle between them. Not certainty, not yet, but possibility. The morning after the wedding arrived quiet and slow. Cole stood barefoot in his kitchen, still in the crisp white shirt from the night before, sleeves rolled halfway. He wasn't tired, he just hadn't slept. Not really. Too much noise in his mind. Margot. That name used to mean nothing. Now it felt heavy, familiar, fragile. She hadn't said much after their talk on the terrace, just nodded slightly, then returned inside with him as the night wound down. But something had changed between them, something he couldn't name but could feel in his chest like an echo. He ran a hand through his hair and leaned on the counter. Across the marble surface sat the morning press release. Whitmore and Langley families unite in private garden ceremony. The headline was clean. Respectable. The accompanying photo was tasteful, him standing still, and Margot mid-turn lace veil caught in the breeze. It looked beautiful. But it wasn't the photo that held his attention. It was the caption. Mrs. Margot Langley Whitmore, curator and daughter of the Langley Museum legacy, brings tradition and refinement to the Whitmore name. He stared at the words longer than he meant to. tradition and refinement. It didn't say anything about who she was. Not really. Later that afternoon, his assistant called. "You have the foundation planning meeting at 4. Also, Caleb asked to speak with you before the board dinner tonight. He said it's important." Cole exhaled through his nose. "Fine. Book him in for 3. And the Restoration Gala walkthrough is tomorrow. You'll need to coordinate with Margot for that." He paused. "I'll reach out to her directly." After the call, Cole stood in his office window, Savannah sprawling beneath him. He watched a streetcar roll past the square. People moving slowly, not knowing their names were on headlines or contracts. He pulled out his phone. Typed. "Would you be willing to meet this evening? No cameras, just us. We need to discuss the gala." He stared at the message, then hit send before he could overthink it. Across town, Margot read the text in silence. She was seated in the upstairs study at the museum, surrounded by old blueprints and garden sketches her father once kept in a leather-bound folder. The scent of aged paper and faint lavender from the hallway diffuser blended into something she always associated with childhood. Stability. History. Now even that felt uncertain. She reread Cole's message thumb hovering over her screen. Then typed, "All right. My place back entrance. Less traffic." A simple reply, but her heart fluttered the second it sent. When Cole arrived that evening, the sun was dipping low, casting warm streaks of light through the ironwork gates. He parked quietly in the alley behind the Langley property, entered through the garden gate, and followed the brick path to the side entrance. Margot opened the door before he could knock. She wasn't dressed up, just jeans and a linen blouse, her hair tucked behind one ear. No makeup, no veil, nothing to protect her from being seen. He liked that more than he expected. She stepped aside. "Come in." The museum felt different at night. Softer. Shadows fell longer. The art on the walls seemed to lean in closer. They walked toward the back study, neither of them speaking. Inside, Margot gestured toward the old leather sofa. "You can sit if you want." Cole stayed standing. "This is where you grew up?" She nodded. "Every corner of it. This building is older than any of us. My father restored most of it himself. He scanned the room, the old wood shelves, the photos, the grandfather clock in the corner. It feels lived in," he said. Margot tilted her head. "Is that your way of saying it's messy?" He glanced at her, and for the first time in days, smiled. She walked to the desk and picked up a folder. "The gala layout. I marked a few sections I think we should avoid for photos." He took the folder but didn't open it. Instead, he asked, "Are you okay?" She froze slightly. The question was too soft, too unexpected. "Yes," she said finally. "I'm just not used to this much attention. Or scrutiny. You're handling it better than most would." She looked up at him. "Am I?" He studied her for a long moment. Then gently, "You don't have to pretend with me." Something in her chest stung at that. She sat down slowly, folding her hands in her lap. "People expect me to be composed, elegant, useful. I don't." She looked at him, startled by the certainty in his voice. Cole moved to the edge of the desk, sitting on it, facing her. "When you helped me on that road 3 years ago, I couldn't speak. I couldn't even stand properly. But you didn't ask for an explanation. You just waited with me. Until I was ready." Margot's voice wavered. "I didn't know who you were. I just saw someone who looked alone." He nodded. "And I never forgot that." The room fell silent. The only sound was the low creak of the building settling. Margot finally whispered, "I never planned for it to be you. When I agreed to the arrangement, I didn't know." He nodded slowly. "Neither did I. But now that you do, she asked. Does it change anything? He met her gaze steady and open. Yes. She swallowed. And is that a good thing? Or a bad one I don't know yet? She gave a soft laugh, almost tired. That's fair. Then Cole said something she didn't expect. I'd like to start over. Margot blinked. What he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small card, held it out to her. Hi, I'm Cole Whitmore. I specialize in restoration, and I'm married to someone I'd really like to get to know. She stared at the card, then at him, then laughed, hand over her mouth. It wasn't polished, it wasn't planned, but it was real. And for the first time since this entire thing began, Margot let herself feel something other than survival. She reached out, took the card, and whispered, Hi, Cole. I'm Margot, and I accept your restart. And right there in the study built by her father under walls painted with history, something new began to grow. Not romance, not yet. But roots. The sound of rain on glass always reminded Margot of unfinished conversations. It had started mid-morning, soft at first, then steadier, soaking the stone pathways that wound through the Langley garden. It blurred the lines of the world outside, turning everything into watercolor. And inside the museum, the light was dim and golden, the kind that made quiet feel sacred. She stood near the east window, holding a steaming mug between both hands. It was chamomile. Her nerves didn't need caffeine. Cole was supposed to arrive in 15 minutes. They were scheduled to tour the gala venue together, their first joint public appearance as a married couple. The first time they'd stand under cameras again since the veil lifted. Margot exhaled slowly. The night before had unraveled something in her. That moment in the study, his quiet cart, her whispered acceptance hadn't fixed everything. But it had softened the edges, made the space between them less about what they had to be, and more about what they might become. She glanced at her reflection in the window. Soft gray blouse, charcoal slacks, hair pinned back simply, understated, composed, safe. A knock at the side entrance pulled her out of the stillness. She opened the door just as Cole stepped under the awning, shaking light droplets from his coat. His hair was damp at the edges. There was no umbrella. Just him soaked in Savannah's gentle storm. You walked? She asked, surprised. Only 3 blocks. It felt good. She stepped aside to let him in. He moved past her without speaking, but the air between them wasn't cold. Just suspended. He looked around, his gaze drifting toward the framed photographs that lined the hallway. You grew up here, he said, half to himself. Margot nodded. Every hallway has a memory, I can tell. They stood there for a moment, neither knowing how to move forward without breaking the fragile peace they'd found. Finally, Margot reached for her coat, ready for the walkthrough. He nodded, then opened the door for her. They rode in silence. The venue for the gala, a newly restored opera house in the heart of Savannah, sat grand and regal beneath its arched facade, stone columns dripping with rain. Inside it smelled faintly of wood polish and old velvet, a place that remembered everything. The event coordinator greeted them with an eager smile. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, we're so glad you're here. We've sectioned off the VIP entry and created a route that minimizes press exposure. Cole nodded. We appreciate that. Margot offered a polite smile, but said nothing. They were led through the main hall, the chandeliers above dimmed for the day. Gold-trimmed balconies curled above them like watching eyes. Rows of deep red chairs lined the room in perfect symmetry. This space, Margot whispered, pausing mid-aisle. My father once said it was the last place he truly felt like a child. Cole turned to her. He used to come here with my grandmother. They didn't have much, but once a year she'd save enough to bring him to a matinee. Cole watched her gently. That's why you fought to keep this place on the preservation list. She nodded. It wasn't about the building. It was about remembering the people who sat here. Their eyes locked for a moment, and Cole felt something rise in his throat, an ache he hadn't expected. She wasn't just elegant or composed. She was layered, rooted, real. The coordinator called them toward the reception wing. As they walked, Cole lowered his voice. I looked you up. Margot blinked. I read your paper on early American botanical studies. The one you co-authored with the Charleston Preservation Council. Margot stared at him. He shrugged slightly. It was good. She let out a laugh, soft and stunned. No one read that paper. Not even my advisor. I did. They reached the reception hall, but neither of them stepped inside. Instead, Margot leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed gently. You're starting to ruin the image I had of you. Oh, he raised a brow. And what image was that? She smiled faintly. Cold, distant, structured. He took a small step closer. And now, her eyes flicked away. I'm starting to wonder if you're more than I bargained for. A quiet pause stretched between them. Then, before it could settle into comfort, a voice echoed from the opposite hallway. There you are. They turned. Caleb approached Dry and pressed in a charcoal suit, smiling like a man who already knew the headline. I didn't expect to see you both so early, he said, eyes on Cole. Impressive. We wanted to review the space, Cole replied flatly. Of course. Caleb's gaze shifted to Margot. You fit in well, you know. All of this. The cameras, the whispers, the performance. Margot didn't flinch. I've lived my life surrounded by performance, she replied. I know when it's being directed and when it's being projected. Caleb's smile tightened. Just remember, he said smoothly, the board watches everything, especially now. The marriage is a stabilizer, not a solution. Keep things clean. Cole stepped forward. You done? Caleb held up both hands. Always. And with that, he turned and disappeared down the hall. Margot let out a slow breath. He's charming. He's dangerous, Cole corrected, but only when no one's watching. She looked at him. Why does he want to see this fail? Because if it works, I keep the company. And if I keep the company, he doesn't get what he thinks he deserves. They stood in silence. Then Margot asked quietly, and what if this works but not for the company? What if it works for us? Cole looked at her, longer than necessary. Then gently, I think that's what scares him most. Outside, the rain began to slow. Inside, they stood just beyond the door to a room that would soon hold a crowd waiting to see if what they had was real. And maybe for the first time, they weren't afraid to let it be. Savannah woke slow the next morning, its skies overcast in that soft, sleepy way that made even the streets feel like they were whispering. Margot stirred awake in the quiet of the Langley house sheets, still warm from sleep, heart oddly restless. The gala was 2 days away. Every detail was locked. Every headline, every angle, every arrangement set. On paper, it was perfect. But perfect had never felt more fragile. She padded barefoot across the hardwood floor, pulling her robe tight, her mind still caught in what Cole had said the day before. What if it works for us? She'd replayed the words all night. Not because they were romantic, but because they were honest. Because they scared her as much as they steadied her. Because maybe she wanted it to work too. In the kitchen, Mira was already making coffee hair pulled up in a loose knot robe, half-open glasses sliding down her nose. You're up early, she mumbled, pouring a second mug. Margot sank into the chair opposite her. Couldn't sleep. Mira slid her the mug. That means your feelings are catching up. Margot gave a tired smile. Is that what this is? It's not the gala. It's not Caleb. It's not the press. Then what? It's Cole. Margot looked down at her cup. He's not who I expected. No, Mira said. But he might be exactly who you need. Before Margot could reply, her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from an unknown number. You don't know what you've married into. Meet me. Alone? Café Rousseau. Noon. She stared at the screen. Then again. Then one more time. Her pulse tightened. Mira noticed. What is it? Margot turned the screen toward her. Mira frowned. That's dramatic. It could be nothing. But I need to know if it isn't. Café Rousseau was tucked off Broughton Street, shaded by sycamores and flanked by bookstores and flower shops. It was quiet, modest, and familiar. The kind of place you didn't go to be seen, you went to remember something. Margot arrived 5 minutes early, nerves prickling. She took a seat at a corner table, ordered tea, and kept her back to the window. At 12:02, a woman approached. Mid-50s, elegant, measured, with eyes that looked like they'd once loved something they regretted. Margot? She said simply. Margot stood uncertain. Do I know you? The woman sat without invitation. No, but I knew your father. Margot stilled. I'm Eleanor Vaughn, the woman said, and before you walked down that aisle I spent 10 years as the Whitmore family's legal advisor. Margot's stomach sank slightly. I'm not here to start trouble, Eleanor said. But I couldn't stay silent either. Margot stayed quiet. Eleanor leaned in. The arrangement between your families was negotiated by Josephine and Caleb. Cole didn't see the contract until days before the ceremony. I know, Margot said softly. What you may not know is that Caleb added a clause, one Cole hasn't seen, one that gives Caleb controlling interest in Whitmore Holdings if your marriage dissolves within the first 6 months. Margot blinked. That's legal, Eleanor said. And cruel. But it was meant to trap Cole, to force his hand. And now, you're in the middle of it. Margot felt her pulse pound in her ears. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know what's circling you. Because I knew your father, and he would have protected you. Eleanor stood slowly. Be careful, Margot. Caleb plays a long game. Then she left. The tea had gone cold by the time Margot remembered to touch it. She didn't speak, didn't move, just sat there staring at the place Eleanor had been, every word looping through her like a storm cloud moving in. That night, Cole waited outside the museum again, hands in his pockets, hair tousled by the breeze. She'd asked him to meet, said it was important. He hadn't asked questions. Now, as the door opened and she stepped onto the porch in a dark green coat and shadowed expression, he knew something was wrong. What happened? He asked. Margot didn't answer right away. She walked down the steps, slowly stopped in front of him, and looked up into his face like she was seeing something for the last time. Is there anything in our marriage contract that you didn't sign off on? His brow furrowed. What do you mean, anything? Caleb added. Anything Josephine approved without telling you. Cole's silence was its own kind of confession. You suspected, she said. He exhaled. I suspected Caleb was pressuring the board. I didn't think he'd go through you to do it. Margot's voice broke just slightly. He did. A dissolution clause. If this marriage ends within 6 months, he gets control. Cole's jaw clenched. You shouldn't have had to hear that from anyone else. But I did, she said. From someone who used to work for your family, who risked a lot to tell me. He stepped forward. Margot. She held up a hand. Please, just answer this. His throat tightened. Did you mean anything you've said to me these past few days? Or was that just part of the plan, too? His voice, when it came, was low and steady. None of this was the plan. She blinked hard, trying to hold something in. And what is it now? Cole stepped forward again, closer this time, into her hurt, into her doubt. I don't know what this is yet, but I know it's not strategy. It's not negotiation. It's not Caleb. He reached for her hand. She let him. I want to know you, he said quietly. Even if it's messy. Even if we have to fight through everything they've built around us. Margot didn't answer, but she didn't pull away. And in that pause between accusation and forgiveness, something unspoken held them together. Not trust. Not yet. But the will to keep trying. Margot sat at her mother's old vanity fingers resting lightly on the edge of the drawer, staring into the mirror with an expression that flickered between strength and exhaustion. The gala was tomorrow night. The press would be there. The investors, her board, his board, their world. She couldn't afford to unravel. But her reflection betrayed her. Behind her, Mira leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching her sister with quiet concern. Are you okay? She asked softly. Margot didn't look away from the mirror. I think the better question is, am I ready to pretend I'm okay? That's not nothing, Mira replied. Pretending can buy you time. Margot turned slowly. But time for what? Before Mira could answer, Margot's phone buzzed on the desk. Cole. Meet me tonight, 1 hour. The square where we first saw each other. I have something to show you. Margot read the message twice, then stood. The square wasn't far, just beyond the museum gates, tucked between two aging bookstores and a historic fountain still trickling under ivy-covered stone. She arrived just as dusk melted into evening, the gas lamps flickering to life one by one, like they were remembering something. Cole was waiting beneath a willow tree, its limbs swaying gently like a breath over water. His coat was unbuttoned hair swept back, but he looked softer somehow, less built, more undone. You came, he said. Margot folded her arms. You left me very little choice. A beat passed between them. I know yesterday was a lot, he began, and I won't ask you to forget any of it. But I need you to see something. She didn't move. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather-bound book, worn creased at the edges, tied with a ribbon. This belonged to your father, he said. It was given to the Whitmore Foundation archives years ago. Caleb never returned it. I had it pulled from storage. Margot took it slowly, her breath catching as her fingers touched the leather. She opened it. Her father's handwriting spilled across the pages sketches of the museum, old gala layouts, poems scribbled in the margins. And near the back, a list. Restoration Dreams, Savannah Opera House, the Whitmore Courtyard, the Langley Museum, and next to the museum entry her name, written carefully, underlined twice. She blinked fast. I thought you should have it, Cole said quietly. She looked up at him, eyes glassy. Why are you doing this? Because I want you to know that not everything about this arrangement was selfish. She closed the book slowly. But it started that way, she said. Yes, he admitted, but it doesn't have to end that way. She looked away. It's hard to know what's real. I'm real, he said. And I think you are too. I think we've both spent a long time pretending to be who people needed us to be. The streetlight buzzed softly overhead. He stepped closer, voice quieter. Let's just stop pretending. Just for tonight. She hesitated. Then slowly she said, walk with me. They moved side by side through the quiet square and into the adjoining garden paths. The city had gone still. Only the rustle of branches and the tap of their shoes on stone kept time. At one point she looked at him. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd met differently? If it hadn't been arranged, I think we'd still end up here, he said. Why? Because even back then on that roadside, you saw me when I didn't want to be seen. That kind of thing doesn't let go. She slowed her steps. And what do you see now? She asked. He stopped, turned to face her. I see someone strong enough to carry history, brave enough to question legacy, and kind enough to still hope. Her throat caught. And then softly she asked, "Would you do it again?" "The marriage?" he asked. She nodded. "If I knew it would bring me back to this moment," he said, "yes." She didn't speak, didn't need to. They stood beneath a string of fairy lights wound through the trellis, not touching, but not distant either. And for the first time since the veil dropped, Margot let herself want something unapproved, something unarranged. She stepped forward just enough for their arms to brush, and whispered, "I'm still scared." He nodded. "Me too. But I want to see where this goes." He smiled. "Then let's go slow." She took a breath. "The gala's tomorrow." "I know. They'll be watching. Let them." A soft pause. Then Cole said, "This isn't for them anymore." She looked up at him, and in that single second, surrounded by all the weight of their world, something small and certain bloomed. A beginning. Not because they had to, but because they chose to. The Langley Museum had never looked more alive. Twinkling lights curled around the wrought iron gates, candles floated in glass bowls across the reflecting pool, and strings of soft jazz filtered through the hedges. The Restoration Gala was no longer just a fundraiser. It was the event of the season. Inside, Savannah's elite mingled with curated elegance, crystal flutes, in hand gowns rustling like whispers, and every conversation coated with a shine of southern charm. Margot stood at the top of the grand staircase, heart echoing somewhere in her ears. Her dress, an ivory silk column with hand-embroidered pearl detail, belonged to her mother once. Restored carefully, worn proudly, a nod to legacy. Mira stepped beside her, adjusting her earring. "You look like a storybook. I feel like an exposed nerve." Mira smiled. "Same thing in our world." Down below, Cole moved through the crowd like a man with purpose. Tailored black suit, no tie, a quiet confidence in how he carried himself now. He wasn't performing anymore. He was showing up, and Margot could see it. She took one steadying breath, then descended. The crowd parted just enough. Photographers snapped softly. Donors smiled like they knew her. Caleb lingered near the far edge. His drink untouched, his expression unreadable. Cole met her at the base of the stairs, offering his hand without speaking. She took it. And just like that, the room recalibrated. They weren't two figures forced into a frame, they were a unit. Real. Unfolding. Magnetic. A woman approached with a glass of champagne. "Mrs. Whitmore, may I just say your father would be so proud." Margot's throat tightened. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Cole squeezed her hand gently, and for a while the night unfolded as it should, polished and calm. But calm never lasts long around ambition. Near the midpoint of the gala, just as the silent auction was gathering attention, Caleb made his move. He approached Cole while Margot was speaking with a donor near the gallery wing, his expression casual, voice quiet. "Beautiful event," he said. "Almost makes me forget the contracts hanging in the balance." Cole didn't flinch. "Tonight's not about business." "Everything's about business," Caleb said, sipping. "Especially when your future depends on a marriage you barely understand." Cole's jaw tightened. "Leave it alone." But Caleb leaned in slightly. "She doesn't know, does she, about the clause being extended?" Cole turned slowly. "What Josephine signed an addendum last week. 6 months became 9. Quietly done. Buried in the language. Legal, of course." Cole felt something in his chest crack. "You went around me. I did what was necessary," Caleb said. "You're too close. Getting sentimental." Cole stepped closer, low voice sharp now. "Undo it." Caleb smiled. That's not how leverage works, cousin. Across the room, Margot caught sight of the two men, faces tense, words tight. Something twisted in her gut. Later on, the gallery's back terrace drenched in candlelight and moonshadow. Cole found her alone, looking out over the fountain her father restored. She didn't turn when he stepped beside her. "Everything all right?" she asked. "No," he said honestly. She looked up at him, waiting. "There's something you need to know," he said. "And I should have told you sooner." Her breath caught chest tightening. "Caleb changed the agreement again," he said. "He extended the dissolution clause without telling me. Without telling anyone. If our marriage fails before 9 months, he gains control." Margot's lips parted, but no sound came. "I didn't approve it," Cole added quickly, "but I didn't stop it either. I thought, maybe I didn't want to know. Maybe I thought if I ignored it, it wouldn't matter. But it does matter," Margot said, voice raw. "Because it means this, whatever this is, it's still being measured. Traded." "No," Cole said, eyes locked on hers. "Not anymore. I'm done playing by his rules." He reached into his coat, pulled out a folder. "I had a lawyer draft an override, a separation of board power. If you sign as co-chair of the Langley Trust, we can neutralize Caleb's vote entirely." She stared at the folder like it burned. "You'd do that?" she asked. "I am doing it." "But why now?" He stepped forward. "Because you're not leverage to me. You're not a pawn. You're the reason I want to build something better than what came before." Tears welled in her eyes. And then through the terrace doors, Caleb's voice rang out. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said smoothly, glass raised, "if I may steal a moment." The crowd hushed. Margot and Cole stood still as Caleb continued. "Tonight we celebrate the union of two great families, but more than that, we celebrate legacy. And as acting board liaison, I'm pleased to announce a new directive, one that ensures stability and tradition will always guide Whitmore Holdings." The applause was polite, but Margot felt the undertone. Cole leaned in. "He's baiting us, waiting for a reaction. Then let's give him one," she whispered back. Together they stepped onto the terrace landing, side by side, unbothered. Margot took the mic from Caleb's hand, her expression poised but fierce. "Thank you, Caleb. And thank you all for being here tonight. This museum, this event, this legacy, it's not about control. It's about care." She looked at Cole. "It's about choosing what matters even when no one's watching." Cole stepped forward. "We believe in that choice, which is why as of tonight we're restructuring Whitmore Holdings' leadership to reflect not just the past, but the future." Gasps echoed. Caleb's jaw twitched. Margot smiled gently. "Because sometimes the most beautiful restorations are the ones we build together." The room burst into applause. But it wasn't the noise that mattered. It was the quiet after, the look in her eyes, and the way Cole reached for her hand, not for show, but for home. The gala had ended with flashes of light and champagne still bubbling in glasses. But now the museum was quiet again. Margot slipped out of her heels and walked barefoot through the empty hall, the silence a stark contrast to the crowd that had filled it hours earlier. The soft rustle of her gown echoed off the marble floor as she passed the portrait gallery. Lights dimmed, but not off. The kind of glow meant for reflection. Cole found her there. He didn't call her name, just walked up beside her, hands tucked into his pockets, gaze steady. "They cleared out fast," he said softly. "They always do. Legacy looks impressive under chandeliers, but it's heavier in the dark." He looked at the painting. She stood in front of her father, mid-lecture chalk in one hand, eyes alight with passion. He'd be proud of you, Cole said. Margot swallowed. I'm not sure I did it for him anymore. He turned to her. Then Hushi met his eyes. I think, for the first time, I did something for myself. A beat passed. Then she laughed under her breath. That's terrifying. No, he said. That's free. They stood there a moment longer, letting the quiet settle. Then Cole reached out, offering his hand. Come with me. She hesitated. Then nodded. They exited through the staff corridor, winding through the museum's back courtyard, until they reached a small wrought iron gate. Margot's brows lifted. I didn't even know this opened. It's an old garden, he said, pushing the gate inward. Part of the original Langley estate. They stepped into a forgotten courtyard. Overgrown but beautiful. The stone benches worn. A broken sundial surrounded by wild jasmine and ferns. The air smelled of old earth and hope. Margot exhaled slowly. It's like stepping back in time. I thought it might feel safe here. She turned to him. Why would I need to feel safe? Because tomorrow we wake up and the press will spin tonight 100 different ways. Because Caleb's going to fight back. And because we're no longer performing. He looked at her fully now. And that means we have to figure out what this actually is. Margot sat on the stone bench, smoothing her dress along her lap. I don't know what this is. Cole sat beside her. I know what I want it to be, he said carefully. But I'm willing to let it become whatever it needs to on your time. She looked at him. And what do you want it to be? He took a breath. Real. Margot's lips parted, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. So she did neither. She reached into her clutch and pulled out the journal, the one Cole had returned to her, her father's. She opened to the page with her name. You know what he wrote under my name, she said softly. Cole leaned closer. Not just restore museum. He added, give her space to dream. Cole's brow furrowed. That's what I never told anyone, Margot whispered. Even when he was sick, even when the museum was slipping. He believed I could do more than protect his legacy. He wanted me to find my own. She looked up, eyes shining. Maybe this marriage was never supposed to be about saving what was. Maybe it's about building something that's never existed. Cole nodded slowly. We don't have to know what that looks like yet, he said. But we can start walking toward it. Margot looked around the courtyard. Then let's start here. Let's restore this garden. He smiled. That's a strange metaphor. It's not a metaphor, she said. It's literal and poetic. Which is how I like my life now, apparently. He laughed softly. She stood stepping over a cracked stone border where roses once bloomed. Help me bring this back. Not for headlines, not for donations, just for us. He followed her shoes, crunching softly on gravel. I'll bring the shovels. I'll bring the stubbornness, she said. He caught her hand. Margot. She turned. I know you're still unsure. About all of this, about me. But I need you to know, I'm not going anywhere. She stared at him. Then quietly. Good, because I'm tired of people leaving when things get messy. I don't want perfect, he said. I just want honest. And in that quiet garden, no music, no audience, she stepped into his arms. Slowly, carefully, completely. They didn't kiss, not yet. Instead, they stood holding one another, surrounded by tangled roots and half-forgotten blossoms. It wasn't the end of their story. It was the start of their choice. The sun over Savannah the next morning was soft gold-tinted and slow to rise, like even the sky was reluctant to interrupt what had bloomed the night before. Margot stood in the old garden with a thermos of coffee, wearing Cole's button-down shirt over leggings and a pair of rain boots. Her hair was tucked up. No makeup. No audience. Just her. And now them. Cole arrived 10 minutes later with 2 small shovels and a paper bag from the farmer's market. "You brought seedlings?" she asked, surprised. He held up the bag. "And fresh scones?" She smiled. "You're learning." They worked side by side for an hour, pulling weeds, removing broken pottery, laying out rough plans for paths and benches. Every now and then their hands brushed. They didn't rush it. Margot kneeled beside a tangled bush and glanced sideways. "Do you think people can change?" she asked quietly. Cole paused mid-rake. "I think people reveal, bit by bit. Sometimes it looks like change, but maybe it's just who they always were." She nodded, thoughtful, and Caleb Cole's jaw tightened. "That's different." Margot stood brushing dirt from her gloves. "He's not going to back down." "No," Cole said. "But he's also losing control. That scares him." They stopped for a break on the old stone bench, sipping coffee, their knees brushing. Margot exhaled. "I got an email from the Atlanta Historical Council." Cole turned to her. "They want to partner on a new series, Modern Restoration Meets Personal History. They want me to lead it." His brows rose. "That's huge." "It is," she said. "But it means more travel, more exposure, more time away." "Do you want it?" She hesitated. "I think I do, but I'm afraid of what that means for us." Cole didn't answer right away. "Then, we're not fragile, Margot." She looked at him cautious. "We were," he said, "when all of this started. But we're not anymore." She wanted to believe that. Just as she was about to respond, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was Mira. Urgent. She picked up. "Hey, check your email," Mira said, voice sharp. Margot stepped aside, opening the message Mira forwarded. Her breath caught. Photos of her and Cole, in the garden, in his shirt, smiling, touching. The subject line, Langley Whitmore marriage. Just a PR campaign. Her fingers trembled slightly as she scrolled. Someone had submitted the shots to a local gossip blog with an anonymous note suggesting the marriage was staged strategic posturing between collapsing legacies. Cole stepped toward her. "What is it?" She turned the screen. His expression darkened. "Who would Caleb?" she said. "Or someone working for him. He wants to make it look like we're playing house, like we're manipulating public sympathy, and if it gains traction, we'll lose everything we just built," she whispered. They stared at each other. Cole's voice dropped. "Let's get ahead of it. By doing what? By telling the truth." Margot blinked. To who? To everyone. That afternoon, they called an emergency meeting with the museum's advisory board. Mira sat to Margot's left while Josephine joined remotely from New York. The boardroom was tense, heavy with silence and guarded eyes. Margot stood at the head of the table. "Some of you may have seen the photos," she began. "I won't waste time denying them. They're real." A flicker of whispers. Mira stayed still. "What's also real is this: our marriage began as a strategic move, but what it's become is something we're choosing, not for optics, not for control, but for honesty." Cole stood beside her. "We made mistakes. We let silence protect the wrong people. That stops today." Josephine's voice came through the speaker. "You're playing a dangerous hand." "No," Margot said. "We're playing our own." The oldest board member, Mrs. Dorsey, leaned forward, folding her hands. "What would you have us do?" Margot held her gaze. "Back the museum's new direction. Stand with us publicly, not because we're married, but because we're not pretending anymore." A long pause. Then Mrs. Dorsey said, "You remind me of your father." Margot swallowed. The board voted unanimously. Outside in the quiet of the courtyard, Cole wrapped his arm around her shoulders as she finally let her head rest against his chest. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. They were no longer surviving the story. They were starting to write their own. A warm drizzle tapped the windows of Cole's office as Margot stood at the floor-to-ceiling pane arms, folded watching Savannah blur into watercolor. The vote had gone in their favor. The museum was safe. The public statements had shifted opinion. Their garden was beginning to bloom. But peace never stayed long in legacy families. Behind her, Cole clicked shut a folder of final paperwork. It's done. She didn't turn. That's what scares me. He stood walking to her slowly. Because it's over, no. Because now there's no reason to stay, except the truth. He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. Then let's start there. She looked at him. Really looked. No walls, no masks. Just the man who'd fought beside her when he didn't have to, and the part of her that didn't need him to, but wanted him anyway. I keep thinking about what happens next, she said. If we actually make a life, how much of it will still belong to everyone else? Maybe that's what we have to rewrite, he said gently. What if the life we build doesn't belong to the Whitmores or the Langleys or the public? What if it only has to make sense to us? She paused. Then asked quietly, would that be enough for you? I've had enough of building things for everyone else, he said. For once I'd like to build something I don't need to hide behind. The rain deepened, a soft roll of thunder in the distance. Margot stepped away from the window and moved toward the old wooden table in the corner, where rolls of sketches, maps, and concept boards were laid out. She unfurled one. It was the garden, but expanded. New lighting, sculptural benches, a small outdoor amphitheater for seasonal performances, notes scribbled in different inks. You've been working on this? She asked. Cole nodded. Since the night we stood out there, I thought it was just a moment. I hoped it could be more. She sat slowly tracing the edges of the design with her fingers. This is beautiful. It's ours. Their eyes met across the table. Then came the knock. Mira. Her face was tight, her breath a little fast. Margot. Caleb's in the lobby. Cole's back stiffened. Margot stood. Did you let him up? No. But he said if we didn't hear him out, he'd go to the media again. Something about a board proxy he's still holding. Cole muttered under his breath. Margot touched his arm. Let me. Alone. She nodded. I need to. Downstairs she found Caleb waiting by the massive glass sculpture in the entry hall. He wore his charm like a jacket tailored, polished, too practiced to trust. You're not easy to pin down these days, he said. Margot didn't return the smile. What do you want to congratulate you? He said smoothly. You've done something remarkable. Truly. The board likes you. The city loves you. And Cole, well, he's practically glowing. Spare me the compliments. He laughed lightly. Fine. Then let's talk business. I thought we were finished. You thought wrong, he said, stepping closer. You may have neutralized my influence on the board, but the Whitmore legacy is vast. Old trusts. Silent partners. If I wanted, I could still choke off funding lines. Quietly. No mess. Just enough to remind everyone where the power really lives. Margot's stomach turned, but her voice stayed steady. Then why haven't you? Because despite your stubbornness, he said, I don't want to ruin you. I want to buy you time. She blinked. What, sell your share of the Whitmore stake back to me? Quietly. I'll triple market value. You walk away with the museum intact, your future funded, and no more press firestorms? Margot stared at him, stunned. You think this was ever about the money? I think everything is. She stepped back. You don't understand me at all. Caleb shrugged. No. But I understand Cole. He'll fold eventually. His guilt runs too deep. Margot's expression hardened. Get out. I'm offering you a clean break. No, she said. You're offering me escape, and I don't need to be rescued. Not by you. Not anymore. He opened his mouth, but Margot lifted her chin. I said leave. This time he did. Margot stood still for a long moment after the doors closed. She breathed deeply, felt her pulse slow. Then she walked back upstairs. Cole stood at the landing, worry creasing his brow. Well, it's over, she said. He hesitated. What did he say that I could buy my freedom? And what did you say? She reached up, placing her hand on his chest. That I already earned it. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking, and in the garden below, a patch of color bloomed tiny green shoots curling up from fresh earth. Just enough to say we're still growing. The garden was finally finished. Not perfect, not flawless, but complete. The gravel paths curved gently through beds of blooming hydrangeas, rosemary and heirloom roses. Iron benches lined the walkways beneath string lights that glowed soft and amber in the evening air. It was the kind of beauty that came from work hands in the soil, decisions made in compromise, and things rebuilt, not replaced. Margot stood near the sundial, now polished and upright again, watching guests arrive for the dedication event. Children ran under the hanging moss. An elderly couple strolled the edge of the reflecting pool, holding hands like they'd never let go. Her mother's voice, soft and proud, echoed in her memory. Make it yours, not mine. And she had. Cole approached from behind, dressed in navy slacks, open collar a speck of dirt still on his shirt sleeve. Always doing the work? You nervous? He asked. Not nervous, she said. Grateful. He smiled, slipping his hand into hers. You should be proud. This place, it breathes because of you. She looked around. Because of us. The board had come around. Donors had stayed. The article that once threatened to unravel them was now buried beneath a wave of genuine admiration. Even Caleb, for all his scheming, had gone quiet. Margot suspected he realized something important power meant nothing if no one respected you enough to follow. A string quartet began playing under the magnolia tree. Mira, already teary-eyed, motioned for Margot to take the small wooden stage near the sundial. Margot looked at Cole. Will you stand with me always? They walked up together. As the crowd hushed, Margot looked out, not just at friends and donors, but at the faces of people who had watched her rise, stumble, and stay standing. She cleared her throat. My father believed in restoring old things, paintings, sculptures, buildings long forgotten by time. She paused. But what I've come to understand is restoration isn't about bringing something back to what it was. It's about bringing something forward, with intention, with heart. She looked at Cole, then back to the crowd. This garden was a secret once, a place hidden by overgrowth. But now it's a place to begin. She gestured around. We've all lost things, people, dreams, versions of ourselves. But when we stop trying to return to what was, and instead start asking what could grow in its place, that's where the beauty lives. There was a silence that settled like a blessing. Then applause, warm, genuine, lasting. Later, as twilight gave way to stars, Margot and Cole slipped away from the crowd and wandered to the far end of the garden, where a narrow wooden bridge arched over a small koi pond. Lanterns floated across the surface, reflecting light in waves. Margot leaned against the rail, letting out a long breath. Do you ever think about how close we came to missing this? Cole stepped beside her. All the time. I spent so long trying to be who everyone needed, she said. Daughter, curator, wife on paper. You were more than enough the whole time, he said softly. They just didn't see it. She turned to him. "And you, I didn't just see it," he said. "I fell in love with it." She smiled, tears gathering. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Her breath caught. "What's that?" He handed it to her. Inside was a simple gold ring, elegant, quiet, meaningful. She looked up, surprised. "We're already married," she whispered. "Yes," he said. "But this one's not for the contract, or the cameras, or the families. It's for us, only us." Her voice trembled. "Cole." He took her hand. "We started this story because we had to, but I want to finish it because I choose to." She nodded, unable to speak. He slipped the ring on her finger. No audience, no pressure, just the moment. And in that moment, Margot realized something. She hadn't fallen in love despite the chaos. She'd fallen because through it, they found clarity. Love wasn't a rescue, or a grand gesture, or even a perfect garden. It was the quiet decision to stay, to listen, to build, over time, over mistakes, over fear. And now over everything they had built something real. She wrapped her arms around his waist and leaned into him, the cicadas humming softly, the stars beginning to pulse above the trees. "I'm not afraid anymore," she whispered. He kissed the top of her head. "Then let's start the rest of our life." As they stood there, the garden swayed gently around them. Alive, rooted, and finally completely theirs. The wedding invitation arrived in an ivory envelope with gold trim, the kind Clara Jensen used to dream about when she was young, long before she stopped believing in fairy tale endings. It lay there in the middle of her dusty kitchen table, among seed catalogs, unpaid bills, and Noah's half-finished dinosaur drawing. She stared at it, unmoving, as if touching it might burn her. It had been 9 years. 9 years since she'd seen him. Clara's fingers hovered over the embossed lettering before finally sliding the card out. The church. A cousin's wedding. The Whitaker name printed in soft cursive at the bottom, like it still meant something to her. She stood still for a long time. Outside, the Indiana wind stirred the wildflowers lining her gravel driveway. The autumn air was just starting to shift, not yet cold, but sharp enough to carry old memories on its back. The kind that whispered. 9 years. She moved through the house like a ghost, checking on Noah's backpack, prepping lunch for the next day, brushing her palms along the edge of the farm table her father built. But the invitation sat heavy in her thoughts. In the hallway mirror, she caught her own reflection. Loose flannel shirt, hair in a braid, dirt under her nails from planting early tulips. She wasn't the woman she used to be, and certainly not the kind of woman that fit into the Whitakers' world anymore. Mama Noah's voice broke her stillness. She turned, her eyes softening. "Yeah, baby." He padded into the room in socks, a juice box in one hand, and his favorite stuffed dog under the other. "Can we go to the party on Saturday? The one with the cupcakes and music?" She blinked. "What party, the wedding?" He held up the envelope she thought she'd hidden under papers. "You got this. It says party." Her breath caught. Clara knelt. "Where'd you find that on the table?" "I like parties." She looked into his eyes. Ben's eyes, and her heart gave a slow, painful squeeze. She should have tossed that invitation into the trash. She should have burned it, but something kept her still. Noah smiled. "Can we go?" Her throat tightened. "It's not really for us, honey. But it has cupcakes." She laughed weakly, brushing his hair back. "Everything's about cupcakes with you, huh?" He grinned. Clara stood and crossed to the window. Beyond the flower beds and the crooked fence line, the horizon was flat and wide the way it always was out here. Peaceful, predictable. And yet her heart beat a little too fast. She hadn't heard from Ben in almost a decade. Not a call, not a letter, not after she left with nothing but her clothes, and a secret she swore she'd keep buried forever. He was married now. That much she'd heard. Small towns didn't let secrets rest for long. The thought of seeing him again made her stomach turn. But more than that, what if Noah saw him? What if he recognized something neither of them could explain? She looked down at her son. His hair was darker than hers, his jawline sharper than any 8-year-old's should be. But it was the eyes. Always the eyes. Maybe she whispered. Noah beamed and ran off, already imagining cupcakes and confetti. Later that night, Clara sat on the porch wrapped in her faded sweater, the stars scattered like salt across the sky. The air smelled of lavender and cold soil. The kind of scent that brought her back to the beginning, back to that one-bedroom apartment where they used to slow dance in the kitchen. Before promises were broken. Before she found that envelope on the counter. Before his mother. She'd left to protect Noah. At least that's what she told herself. That lie had been easy to believe back when he was small and helpless, when silence felt like strength. Now the silence was starting to feel like shame. The next morning, Clara loaded the van with flower buckets for a delivery downtown. Her floral business had grown slow but steady. Brides loved her wildflower bouquets and carefully imperfect arrangements. There was something honest about her work that resonated with women who'd also stopped pretending. Rosa met her at the bakery with 2 almond croissants and a knowing look. "I saw your name on the church list," she said as they sat by the window. Clara took a bite. "Of course you did. You going? I haven't decided." Rosa sipped her coffee. "That means yes." Clara shook her head. "I haven't seen him since—" "I know." They sat in silence for a moment. Rosa leaned in. "He's not the same. People say he's quiet now. Distant. Like he's still living in a room no one else can see." Clara looked out at the town square. Ben used to work on that old fountain with his father. He was always fixing things, except the one thing that mattered. "Let me guess," she said. "He's still married?" "Yes." "Camille, the type who wears perfume to bed." Clara smirked despite herself. "Sounds about right." Rosa reached across the table. "You don't have to go. But if you do, don't go for him. Go for you. Let them see what they lost, what you've built." Clara didn't answer, but the thought stayed with her. 2 days later, she stood in front of her bedroom mirror, smoothing the hem of a navy blue dress she hadn't worn in years. It hugged her softly, not like it used to, but it still fit. Her hair was swept back. Her makeup was simple. And yet she felt like she was dressing for a funeral, not a wedding. Noah peeked in from the hallway. "You look pretty, Mama." She smiled. "Thank you, sweetheart." He walked in holding a tiny bouquet of wildflowers he'd picked from the front yard. "You should take these. They're good luck." Clara blinked fast. She took the flowers, knelt down, and kissed his forehead. "You're my good luck." As they drove into town, the church bells were already chiming. Cars lined the gravel lot. She saw the name Whitaker on the banner stretched across the gate, and something deep in her chest pulled tight. She parked far from the entrance. The chapel was filled with laughter and camera flashes, the kind of social scene she once belonged to, but now viewed like an outsider looking through glass. She kept Noah close as they took a seat near the back. Old ladies whispered. Men nodded politely. Then through the arched entryway, he appeared. Ben Whitaker, her ex-husband. Time had changed him. His hair was shorter, peppered with gray, his posture more rigid. He looked like someone who still carried the weight of the past in his shoulders. And when his eyes met hers, just for a second, she forgot how to breathe. He didn't smile. Neither did she. But something flickered. And then, without warning, Noah tugged her hand. "Mom," he whispered. Clara turned, startled. He pointed toward the front. That man. He smiled at me. Her pulse jumped. Noah leaned in closer, voice low and curious. He looks like me. Clara froze. The air around her shifted. The sound of music of laughter faded into something distant and dull. And just like that, the past started breathing again. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The moment passed in a breath, but Clara felt it settle into her bones like winter air, slow and heavy. She kept her eyes forward, her hand resting lightly on Noah's shoulder as the wedding ceremony began. The pastor's voice echoed through the vaulted ceiling, lilting between scripture and love stories, but Clara barely heard a word. Her thoughts spiraled inwards, circling back to that look, the one Ben had given her, and then her son. A look that lingered too long to be casual, too guarded to be kind. She had prepared herself for a stiff nod. A polite smile, maybe. What she hadn't prepared for was that. Noah leaned against her legs, swinging slightly beneath the pew. "Can I get a cupcake?" after he whispered. She smiled faintly. "If you're good, I'm always good." Her heart tugged. 8 years old, full of sweetness and sass, still thinking the world is simple. She wished she could freeze time. Keep him right here before the questions started growing teeth. When the ceremony ended, Clara considered slipping out with the crowd. Quietly. No drama. But the sight of Rosa waving from across the aisle stopped her. She was standing with a man Clara didn't recognize, tall with kind eyes and a clipboard tucked under one arm. Probably catering. Rosa mouthed, "Don't leave." Clara sighed. "Come on, baby," she said softly to Noah. "Let's get you that cupcake." The reception was set up behind the church in a white tent strung with fairy lights. Long tables held tiered platters of food and mismatched mason jars filled with buttercream roses, Clara's roses. She'd delivered them 2 days ago, never guessing she'd be here to see them bloom. They joined the slow-moving buffet line. Noah buzzed with excitement at the sight of sprinkles and chocolate frosting. Clara tucked herself behind him, quietly, invisible, until a voice slid over her shoulder like warm wind. "I didn't think you'd come." She froze. Slowly, she turned. And there he was. Ben Whitaker. Close now. Too close. He wore a navy suit that fit his frame like it was made for him, a gray tie knotted neatly at his collar. His hair was shorter than she remembered, his jawline more defined. But the eyes, those soft green eyes, were the same. "I didn't think I would either," she said, her voice quiet but steady. He looked at her like he was still trying to decide if she was real. He hesitated, then glanced at Noah. "He's yours." Clara felt her throat close. "Yes," Ben nodded slowly, gaze flicking back to her. "He looks like you." She said nothing. He paused. He smiled at me. Just now. It caught me off guard. Clara felt her stomach twist. Kids do that. Ben looked like he wanted to say more, but before he could, another voice joined them. Sweet, smooth, practiced. "There you are." A woman appeared beside him, arm slipping through his. She wore a pale green dress that shimmered like satin, every strand of her blonde hair perfectly pinned. Her perfume reached Clara before her voice did, floral, expensive, sharp. "Camille." Clara's chest tightened. "I thought you'd wandered off again," Camille said, smiling up at Ben, before turning to Clara with a softness that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, you must be one of the locals. I love your shop, by the way. The wildflowers are so rustic." Clara smiled politely. "Thanks. I grow them myself." Camille's smile tightened. Of course you do. Ben cleared his throat. Camille, this is Clara, she said, cutting him off gently. We've met before. Clara looked at Camille, waiting for the performance. Ben blinked, caught in the middle. Camille leaned in slightly. He used to talk about you. Years ago. Said you were good with your hands. Clara met her gaze steady. Still am? Camille gave a light, tinkling laugh. Well, lucky for us, your flowers are lovely. Ben shifted uncomfortably. Clara glanced down at Noah, who was eyeing the cupcakes with increasing urgency. Come on, sweetheart, she said softly. Let's get you that cupcake. Noah grinned, tugging at her hand. As she turned to leave, Ben stepped forward, voice low. Clara, wait. She paused. He looked down at Noah, then back at her. It's really good to see you. She nodded once, then walked away. Behind her, she heard Camille say, She seems nice. But her tone said something else. Clara didn't look back. They found an empty bench near the edge of the tent. Noah sat cross-legged, devouring frosting like it was the first sweet thing he'd ever tasted. Best day ever, he mumbled through a mouthful. Clara smiled faintly, wiping a smudge from his cheek. But her mind was still spinning. Ben had looked at her like he was remembering something he didn't want to forget. He hadn't been cruel. He hadn't even asked why she left. But that question unspoken hung between them like smoke. And Camille knew, or at least suspected enough to stay close. Rosa found her again, just as Noah finished his second cupcake. Mind if I steal her for a minute? Rosa asked Noah with a wink. He nodded, face smeared with chocolate. I'm gonna go look at the fountain. Clara stood beside Rosa, watching him run toward the stone centerpiece, the same one Ben helped build all those years ago. You okay? Rosa asked. Clara nodded slowly. I think so. That woman Camille has the warmth of a stainless steel refrigerator. Clara laughed softly. She's everything Elaine wanted for him, and nothing he needs. Clara looked at her. You really think he didn't know I do? Rosa said. And I think you're not done with him. Clara turned back toward the crowd. Ben and Camille were greeting guests, his smile thinner now. I'm not looking to open old wounds. Maybe not, Rosa said. But some things don't stay buried. Not forever. Clara looked at her hands, still smelling faintly of lilacs and soil, and felt something shift deep inside her. A restlessness. A reckoning. She had built a quiet life out of broken pieces. She had raised Noah with love and honesty and solitude. But seeing Ben again stirred something that hadn't moved in years. Not longing. Not regret. Just unfinished things. And Clara had never been good at leaving things undone. The church lawn was humming with chatter and clinking glasses, but Clara stood still under the edge of the reception tent, watching her son, as he crouched beside the fountain tracing circles on the wet stone with his fingers. The same fountain Ben once helped lay brick for a lifetime ago. She knew this town. She knew how it remembered things, and how it liked to pretend it didn't. Behind her, someone cleared their throat. I owe you an apology. She turned slowly. Ben stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, uncertainty softening his features. The wind caught the edges of his suit jacket, and for a second, he looked like the boy she once married, not the man she'd left. For what she asked, folding her arms. For the surprise, he said. I didn't expect to see you today. Camille and I weren't planning to stay long. Clara studied him carefully. But you did stay. Ben glanced toward the guests, then back at her. I guess I wanted to see if it was really you. His voice was low, measured, almost afraid of what her answer might be. You've changed, he said. Clara raised a brow. We both have. There was a long pause between them. He took a step closer, just enough for his voice to drop. I saw the boy. Your son. He's got your eyes. But something else too. Her stomach tightened. Ben searched her face. He's 8. She didn't answer. Not directly. She didn't need to. His jaw clenched. Not in anger, but something heavier. I never knew, he whispered. Clara blinked hard. You were already gone. His eyes flinched. You left, Clara. She nodded slowly. Yes, I did. The weight of it sat thick between them. He exhaled sharply, hands still jammed in his pockets. So you never thought to tell me she looked away, focusing on Noah. He had started stacking pebbles by the edge of the fountain. I thought about it every day. Ben's shoulders dropped, some unspoken tension breaking apart. But I was scared. Clara continued, her voice quieter now. Not of you. Of what your family would do. Of what I'd have to relive. He was silent. And maybe she added, some part of me didn't want to give you the chance to walk away a second time. Ben's face twisted at that, the sting unmistakable. I didn't walk away because I wanted to. Clara's heart skipped. He stepped closer. You think I just stopped caring overnight, that I didn't look for answers when you disappeared? I think, she said slowly, that you trusted someone else's version of me more than you trusted me. That silenced him. The music from the speakers floated around them, soft and slow, an old country tune someone's aunt must have chosen. Couples were beginning to dance near the tent entrance. Laughter rose like steam from hot pavement. Clara blinked away the sting behind her eyes. I didn't come here to start something, she said. I just wanted my son to enjoy a cupcake, to see what joy looks like in a world that hasn't always been kind. Ben followed her gaze back to Noah. The boy was now tossing petals into the fountain one by one, as if making silent wishes. I should have known, Ben said under his breath. Clara turned to him again. I should have looked harder, fought harder, asked why. I let other people tell me who you were, and I believed them. That's on me. The rawness in his voice caught her off guard. Ben never used to talk like this, especially not about the past. Before she could respond, Camille's voice floated toward them from a few yards away. There you are. Clara turned to see her walking across the lawn heels, sinking slightly into the grass, a glass of sparkling cider in her hand. Her smile was tight, eyes sharp. Everyone's wondering where you went, sweetheart, she said to Ben, brushing her fingers down his sleeve as she reached him. Ben cleared his throat. Just catching up. Clara took a breath, stepping back half a step. I should go. Camille tilted her head. Leaving already. That's too bad. I was hoping we could chat a bit. I'd love to hear more about your shop. I heard your arrangements are very organic. Clara smiled politely. I'm sure you've got plenty of florists. Oh, but none with your flair, Camille said sweetly, her voice as smooth as honey over ice. And of course you know the Whitakers always support local talent. Clara caught the flicker in Ben's expression, something between discomfort and warning. She didn't respond. I should get my son, she said, already turning. Ben spoke up before she could take another step. Clara, wait. But she kept walking. Noah was sitting cross-legged near the fountain, humming a little song as he laid his petals in a row. She crouched beside him, brushing his hair gently. Ready to go, baby? He looked up, a little pout forming. But I didn't get to dance. Her heart tugged. Behind them, the music shifted to a waltz. Couples swayed beneath the string lights. Camille had already dragged Ben toward the center of the lawn, placing one hand on his shoulder, the other in his palm. Clara stood offering her hand. One slow dance. Just us. Noah grinned and jumped up. They swayed awkwardly near the edge of the crowd, Noah standing on her feet, arms around her waist. Clara hummed along with the melody, resting her cheek against the top of his head. And yet her eyes kept drifting back to Ben. He wasn't watching her, not directly, but he felt her. She could see it in the way his movements faltered, the way his smile didn't reach his eyes. Camille whispered something in his ear. He didn't react. When the song ended, Clara stepped back. "Time to go," she said softly. Noah sighed but nodded. "Okay." As they turned to leave, a soft voice called out, "Clara." She turned. Ben stood alone now. Camille lost in a conversation across the lawn. He hesitated, then stepped forward. I'd like to talk more. Just us." She stared at him. Not with bitterness, not with hope, just truth. "Now's not the time," she said. His shoulders slumped slightly. Then, when she looked down at Noah, then back at him, "I don't know, Ben. I really don't." And with that, she walked away, her son's hand in hers, her heart thudding loud and unsure. Behind her, the music picked up again, but she couldn't hear it anymore. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. It rained the next morning, light at first, then steadier, like the sky couldn't decide if it wanted to grieve or cleanse. Clara stood at the edge of her porch, mug in hand, watching the drops slide down the tin roof. The farm looked washed out and quiet, like it was holding its breath. The wildflowers drooped slightly under the weight of the weather, but they'd bounce back. They always did. She heard Noah in the kitchen humming as he poured cereal into a bowl. The normalcy of it should have settled her. It didn't, because tucked between the grocery flyer and a past-due electric bill on her kitchen counter was something that didn't belong. A plain white envelope. No return address. Just her name. Written in sharp, even script she didn't recognize. She'd missed it the night before, probably slid under the door when she was putting Noah to bed. Her hands were still wet from washing dishes when she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No message, no signature, just a photocopy. A copy of Noah's birth certificate. Except this one looked different. Her breath caught. In the box labeled father's name, it was blank. But it wasn't supposed to be. She remembered writing Ben's name clear as day. She remembered gripping the pen with shaking fingers in that hospital room, still in pain, heart still raw, when the nurse had handed her the clipboard. She didn't leave it empty. She hadn't. Clara sat down hard in one of the kitchen chairs, the paper trembling in her hand. Who would send this? And why now? The rain drummed louder on the roof. She looked over at Noah, who was now sitting cross-legged on the couch, watching cartoons, completely unaware that the ground beneath his little world had just shifted. She picked up the envelope again, tipping it upside down. A second paper fluttered out. A sticky note. 5 words. Black ink. Block letters. He still doesn't know. Yet. Clara's stomach dropped. She stared at the note as if it might rearrange itself into something safer, something more rational. But it didn't. A chill rippled across her back. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't someone being cruel for fun. Someone knew. Someone wanted her to know they knew, and they were pushing. Her mind raced Elaine Camille Ben himself. No. Ben had been too shocked yesterday. She'd seen it. He didn't know. Not really. But someone did. And now they were inviting chaos back into the life Clara had fought so hard to keep small and safe. She grabbed her phone and called Rosa. "Clara, it's early. Is everything okay?" "No," she said, voice tight. "Can you come over? 15 minutes later. Rosa stood in Clara's kitchen robe, still on hair half-tied, holding the paper like it was radioactive. "Are you sure you wrote his name?" Rosa asked gently. "Yes. I'm not imagining it." Rosa looked at the paper again. "You think someone had it changed?" "I think someone didn't want Ben to know," Clara whispered. They both sat in silence, the kind that stretches into the corners of a room. "Do you think he'd want to know?" now Rosa asked. Clara hesitated. "He asked me how old Noah was. I didn't answer. I couldn't." Rosa gave her a long, careful look. "And if he finds out from someone else," Clara didn't answer. Instead, she stood and stared out the window. The rain had eased into a mist. The fields glistened like glass. She imagined what it would be like if it all came crashing down, if Ben showed up at her door demanding answers, if Camille turned Noah into a weapon, if Elaine got involved. Her phone buzzed. A text, unknown number. "You've had time. He deserves truth." She nearly dropped the phone. Her heart thudded against her ribs. Someone wasn't just sending hints now. They were watching. Waiting. "What is it?" Rosa asked, already reading her face. Clara handed over the phone. Rosa read the message aloud, then looked up, alarmed. "Who is this? I don't know." Rosa's voice dropped. "Do you think you're being followed? I don't know that either." A long pause. Clara Rosa said slowly, "I love you, so I'm going to ask this once. Are you prepared for what might happen if this comes out?" "No," Clara said. "But I'm more afraid of what happens if it doesn't." That afternoon, after Rosa left, Clara opened a box she hadn't touched in years. It was buried in the back of her bedroom closet, under old scarves and unopened holiday cards. Inside were fragments of another life. An ultrasound photo, a letter she'd written but never mailed, a hospital record with Ben's full name written in her own handwriting next to a date, a weight, and the name Noah Jensen Whitaker. No hyphen. No confusion. Proof. She stared at that document for a long time, and then something strange caught her eye. In the bottom corner of the hospital form, a small code, typed not handwritten. She picked up her phone again and searched it online. A location code. For a hospital administrator's override. Her heart dropped lower. She remembered now. Elaine sat on that hospital's board. Still did last she heard. Clara closed the box, her fingers trembling. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood breathing slow and shallow, and for the first time in 9 years, she whispered a thought she'd buried too deep. They didn't just erase his name. They erased his right to know. That night after Noah went to bed, Clara sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket. Rain finally gone air, thick with that post-storm stillness. She stared up at the stars, barely visible behind the clouds, and whispered to no one. "What do I do now?" A breeze stirred the wind chimes. Her phone buzzed again. "Same number. It's not too late, but soon it will be." Clara sat in silence, fingers frozen on the screen. She looked toward Noah's bedroom window, then back to the phone. Then she typed 3 words. "Who are you?" No reply, just the sound of night stretching long and wide around her, and the soft hum of something waking inside her, the beginning of a storm she knew she could no longer outrun. Clara hadn't dreamed about him in years, but that night, after the text, after the rain, after sitting on the porch until her tea went cold, she closed her eyes and saw him. Not Ben now in tailored suits and careful smiles. Ben then. 24 barefoot in the kitchen flour on his hands, and music playing too loud from the old radio. They were dancing, laughing as he spun her around in the narrow space between the stove and the sink. She was pregnant, just barely showing, and he'd pressed his hand to her stomach like it was the most sacred thing he'd ever touched. "Promise me we'll never forget this," he'd said. But they had. And now only one of them knew why. Clara sat up in bed, heart pounding, the weight of memory pressing on her chest like a hand. She couldn't keep avoiding the past. Not anymore. Because someone was pulling her toward it. She got up, padded barefoot through the quiet house, and opened the living room window to let the morning light in. Mist clung to the ground, like breath on glass. The scent of wet soil drifted through the screen. She needed answers, not whispers, not shadows, truth. And she knew where to start. By mid-morning, Clara was standing in front of the hospital where Noah had been born. The same red brick, the same chipped bench near the main entrance. It hadn't changed in 9 years, but she had. She clutched her sweater around her and stepped inside, the sterile scent of floor polish and coffee hitting her like a wave of déjà vu. "Can I help you?" the woman at the front desk asked, polite but distracted. Clara cleared her throat. I had a child here 9 years ago. I need to request a copy of the birth certificate." "The original one." The woman glanced up. "You'll need to fill out a form and provide ID." Clara nodded, filling it out with hands that trembled more than she wanted to admit. The woman took the form, typed into her computer, then frowned. "I'm sorry," she said, "but there's a note on your file. It's restricted. You'll have to make a formal request through administration." Clara blinked. Restricted, yes. She lowered her voice. "Some patients request confidentiality flags for legal or privacy reasons. But I never requested that." The woman offered a tight smile. "Sometimes they're added by family members if they were authorized." Clara felt the chill creep in again. Elaine had sat on this hospital board for over a decade. She'd made donations, held fundraisers, knew people in positions that didn't ask questions. Who approved the restriction? Clara asked. The woman hesitated. "I'm sorry, I can't disclose that." Clara forced a nod, thanked her, and left. But her heart was thudding in her chest like a warning drum. She drove straight to Rosa's bakery. It smelled like cinnamon and butter and fresh bread, but even that comfort couldn't soften the sharp edge Clara was holding inside. Rosa took one look at her and locked the front door. "What happened?" "They changed the record," Clara said, voice tight. "It's flagged, restricted." Rosa frowned. "Who would do that, Elaine? Or someone connected to her? Maybe even the hospital administrator?" "I don't know." Clara sat down hard on a stool near the counter. "I thought I'd buried this, that I could just live quietly, raise my son, and that would be enough." Rosa poured her coffee without asking. "But someone wants it all brought back up," Clara continued, staring into her cup. "And they're not going to stop." "You think it's Ben?" Clara shook her head. "No. His face at the wedding. He didn't know. I felt it. He looked at Noah like he was seeing something that didn't make sense." Rosa leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "So who does know?" Clara reached into her bag and pulled out the envelope, the copy of the certificate, the note. Rosa read it all slowly, then looked up. "You think it's Elaine? She's the only one who benefits from the silence." Rosa was quiet for a long time. Then carefully she asked, "What are you going to do?" Clara exhaled, eyes burning. "I don't know. I want to protect Noah. That's all I've ever wanted. But what if I'm doing more harm by keeping this secret?" Rosa walked around the counter, sat beside her. "Can I tell you something you won't want to hear?" Clara nodded. "You're not the same woman who left 9 years ago. Back then you were afraid of them, of what they could take. But now you've built a life. You've survived worse than their whispers." Clara said nothing. Rosa continued. You don't owe anyone your silence, especially not someone who lied to your face and stole your truth. Clara looked up, and for the first time, the weight she'd carried for almost a decade didn't feel like armor. It felt like chains. Later that evening, after Noah was asleep, Clara sat at the kitchen table with the box from her closet open in front of her. Letters, photos, the original hospital discharge papers. She found the envelope addressed to Ben, the one she'd written and never mailed. The words still raw, the ink smudged from where she'd once cried onto the page. Ben, I don't know if this will ever reach you. I don't even know if I should send it. But I'm pregnant. And it's yours. I wanted to tell you in person, but when I called, your mother answered. She told me to disappear. She said if I didn't... Clara closed her eyes. She remembered every syllable of that conversation. Elaine's voice, measured and firm. He's with someone else now. Don't ruin that. If you say the child is his, I'll make sure no one believes you. And then the click of the line going dead. Clara folded the letter again, hands trembling, and placed it on the table. She couldn't run anymore. Not from Ben. Not from the past. Not from whatever storm was coming. Her phone buzzed. One message, same number. Truth only hurts when it's too late. Don't wait. Clara stared at the screen for a long time. And then for the first time, she replied, "What do you want from me?" The response came instantly. Not me. Him. He deserves what was stolen. Clara's fingers hovered over the screen. Her breath was shaky, but her spine was straight. She got up, walked to the window, and looked out at the quiet field beyond her porch. Morning was hours away, but something new had already begun. The morning sun filtered through the curtains in quiet golden strips falling across Clara's kitchen table, where the unopened letter still sat like a stone. She hadn't touched it since last night. It sat beside her coffee untouched, too. Across from her, Noah was humming, while drawing with colored pencils, his little feet swinging under the chair, rhythmically tapping the legs. She couldn't stop watching him, how easily he filled the silence. How unaware he was that everything she thought she'd protected him from was unraveling. "Mom," he said without looking up, "can I take my dragon picture to school?" She blinked. "Of course." He smiled, proud, then leaned in close to color the wings with slow, careful strokes. Clara swallowed, forcing her voice to stay light. "Did you sleep okay? Uh-huh. I dreamed I had a baby dragon, and it slept on my pillow." She smiled. "That's a very small dragon, or a very big pillow." She laughed softly, but it felt distant. Her heart was somewhere else. Because the truth was, sleep had barely touched her. She'd lain awake, thinking about the hospital record, the note, the messages, the person who kept pushing from the shadows. And Ben always. Ben, his eyes, his voice at the wedding, the way he looked at Noah like he was seeing echoes of something he couldn't name. She wanted to tell him. She wanted to scream it, or whisper it, or write it in the dirt at his feet. But how and what would it destroy if she did? Later that afternoon, Clara was restocking dahlias outside the shop when Rosa pulled up in her truck and slammed the door with purpose. Clara looked up. "Let me guess. You're here to drag me into another intervention." "No," Rosa said, tossing her sunglasses onto the seat. "I'm here because you need to see something." Clara straightened. "What now?" Rosa held up her phone. "You're not gonna like it." Clara wiped her hands on her apron and took it. A news article was open local real estate update. The headline was ordinary enough Whitaker and Sons to open new regional office in downtown Marion. But the photo made her stomach flip. Ben standing in front of a building Clara passed almost every day smiling for a ribbon-cutting photo with Camille by his side. She stared at the screen. "They're expanding here." "They're already here," Rosa said. "That building's 2 blocks from your shop, and they're not just visiting." Clara felt a cold draft slip beneath her skin. Rosa lowered her voice. "This isn't a coincidence, Clara. Someone planned this." Clara's mind raced. "Do you think Camille knows? She definitely suspects something," Rosa said, "and she doesn't strike me as the sharing type." Clara stared down the road past the flower beds toward the corner of town, where the building stood where Ben would be every day now. "What am I supposed to do?" she whispered. "Figure out what you want." Rosa said simply, "Because whether you're ready or not, the truth's coming to your front door." That night, Clara didn't cook. She and Noah had sandwiches on the porch, watching the sun slip behind the trees, the air thick with late summer stillness. Mom, Noah said between bites, "Why do you never talk about my dad?" The question landed like a hammer wrapped in velvet. She blinked. He was looking at her with honest curiosity, not sadness, not resentment, just wondering. I mean, he continued, "Other kids have dads, some don't. But I just wondered." "Did you love him?" Clara set her sandwich down. She folded her hands on the table, tried to breathe. "Yes," she said softly. "I did." Noah nodded slowly. "Is that why I look like him?" Her heart clenched. "You noticed?" He grinned. "You always say I have your laugh. But my eyes look like someone else." She reached across the table, brushed his hair back. "You have his eyes. Was he nice?" Clara's voice caught. He was kind, strong, a little lost sometimes, but he loved building things. He could fix anything. Noah's eyes lit up. Like treehouses, she smiled. Exactly. They sat in silence, cicadas buzzing in the trees. Then Noah leaned against her arm. "I wish I could meet him. Just once." Clara closed her eyes, resting her chin on his head. He didn't know it, but his wish had just lit a fuse. The next morning, Clara walked into her shop early, hoping the quiet would help her think. She flipped the closed sign to open arranged tulips by the front window, then stopped cold. Across the street, a man stepped out of the new Whitaker building. Ben. He didn't see her. He was on the phone, pacing slightly. Dressed in a dark blazer, shirt sleeves rolled to his forearms the same way he used to when he was wiring outlets in their first apartment. Clara stood perfectly still, watching from behind the glass. And then, as if pulled by a string, Ben turned. Their eyes met. He froze. The phone slipped from his ear. Neither of them moved. She thought about stepping back. Instead, she lifted her hand just slightly. A wave. Not hello, not goodbye. Just, "I see you." Ben's mouth parted like he might say something. But before he could, Camille stepped out of the building behind him, smiling sunglasses perched perfectly atop her head. Ben turned away first. Clara let the curtain fall. She leaned against the wall, pulse racing. The past wasn't knocking anymore. It had crossed the street, and it was standing on her doorstep. The bell above the flower shop door jingled as Clara was finishing up a sympathy bouquet for a long-time customer. She looked up expecting Mrs. Willard from the bakery, or maybe a delivery boy. But it was him. Ben stepped inside, like he didn't quite believe he was allowed to, as if the floor might vanish beneath his feet. He held the door for a second too long before letting it close behind him. Clara's hand stilled around the white lilies in her grip. She hadn't seen him up close since the wedding, hadn't heard his voice, outside the echo of memory. But here he was in her space, surrounded by the scent of lavender and roses, and the soft hum of the shop's old ceiling fan. He looked nervous. She straightened and met his eyes. "You looking for tulips or truth?" His lips quirked, half smile, half ache. "I wasn't sure you'd even let me through the door." She turned back to the bouquet, trimming the stems with precise, practiced movements. The door's not the problem. He stepped further in slowly, like he was walking across a frozen lake. Can we talk? She glanced up. We're talking now. Ben ran a hand through his hair. Clara? Her name sounded different in his voice, now older, more worn in, like something he'd stopped saying for too long, and now wasn't sure he had the right to use. She gestured to the stool by the window. You've got 5 minutes before my noon appointment. He sat. The silence between them stretched and shifted thick with the weight of everything they hadn't said for nearly a decade. I didn't come here to fight, Ben said finally, or to make things harder for you. Clara leaned on the counter, arms crossed. Then why did you come? Ben hesitated. Because I can't stop thinking about that boy. She stiffened. My son, he said the words barely a whisper. He's mine, isn't he? The room shrank around her. Her throat tightened. Why now, she asked, her voice quieter than she meant. Ben shook his head. I don't know. Maybe because I looked at him and saw something that made sense. And it scared me. Then I saw the birth certificate. Clara blinked, stunned. You saw it? He nodded. Someone sent me a copy. Anonymously, a week ago. Her breath caught. Of course, whoever had been sending messages wasn't playing sides. They wanted me to know, he added. Clara stepped back slowly. That wasn't me. I didn't send it. I know, he said, eyes searching hers. It didn't feel like you. She pressed a hand against her chest, grounding herself. I wrote your name on that certificate, Ben. In that hospital room. I swear to you, I never erased it. His jaw tensed. Then who did your mother sat on the board of that hospital? Ben closed his eyes. The weight of the truth landed like bricks across his shoulders. Clara continued, her voice shaking now. I was alone. I called. She answered. She told me to disappear, that you'd moved on, that I'd ruin your life if I came back. She promised if I told anyone, she'd make sure no one believed me. Ben looked up slowly, eyes glassy. You left because of her. I left because I had no one else, and I couldn't raise a child under that kind of threat. He stood pacing once, then twice, before stopping in front of the lilies Clara had just arranged. He touched one absent-mindedly. I didn't know. Clara, I swear to you, I didn't know any of this. I believe you, she said quietly. His gaze snapped to hers. You do. She nodded. Because if you had known, you wouldn't be here now, looking at me like the world just cracked open. Ben sat again, running a hand over his face. What do I do with this? Clara blinked. What do you mean? I mean, how do I just start over with a son who doesn't even know I exist? The words wrapped around her heart like rope. I don't know, she said truthfully. I've spent 9 years trying to keep him safe. And now I'm afraid he'll hate me when he finds out. Ben's voice softened. He won't. Clara gave a bitter laugh. You don't know him. No. But I want to. She looked at him, really looked, and saw something fragile behind his eyes. Not pity, not guilt, just longing. The kind that builds in a man who's lost time he can't ever get back. I'm not asking for custody, Ben added quickly, or to wreck whatever life you've built. I just want to know him. Clara stepped back towards the bouquet and gently rearranged one of the stems. I don't know how to explain this to him. Not yet. He thinks his dad was just someone I used to know, a ghost in the past. Ben's voice dropped to almost nothing. That makes me a ghost too. The truth in that hurt more than she expected. She turned to face him fully. Let me be clear. I'm not protecting you. I'm protecting him. You don't get to walk in and call yourself a father just because you showed up now. I know that. You missed his first steps, his first word, his fever at 2 in the morning, his kindergarten graduation. All of it. I know. Clara's voice broke. You don't get to fast forward through the pain and land at the good parts. Ben's eyes glistened. Then let me earn the rest. The silence between them stretched, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt suspended, waiting. Clara's breath shook as she finally said, "If I let you near him, even as a friend, I need to know you won't vanish again. I won't." She studied him, eyes scanning for cracks, for signs of hesitation. But all she saw was a man grieving the life he didn't know he'd lost. Then she nodded once. "I'll think about it." Ben stood slowly. "Thank you." As he reached the door, he paused. "One more thing," he said without turning. "Camille doesn't know. Not yet." Clara's chest tightened. "She will," Ben said. "But I wanted you to hear that from me first." And with that, he stepped outside, the bell jingling softly behind him. Clara stood alone in her shop, surrounded by flowers and silence, the bouquet still unfinished. But something had changed. This time the door hadn't closed with finality. It had opened something. And for better or worse, it wasn't shutting again. The wind was sharp that morning. It carried a scent Clara hadn't smelled in years, oak leaves turning rain settling into the earth, and something faintly metallic, a scent she remembered from childhood, walks with her father, quiet and thoughtful, before everything in her life had been broken and rebuilt into something unrecognizable. She stood on her porch with a cup of coffee growing cold in her hand, watching the town come to life. Delivery trucks rumbled past the square. A jogger waved from across the street. The same rhythm, the same quiet rituals of the place she'd escaped to, hoping to be forgotten. But nothing was quiet now. Not really. Not with Ben across the street starting a new life in the very town she'd chosen to bury the old one. Not with her son's questions blooming into deeper shadows. Not with her past sending messages in the night. Inside the house, Noah was sitting on the floor, surrounded by markers and paper humming while he drew. His latest obsession was maps, cities, countries, imaginary islands where dragons and astronauts lived side by side. His imagination was fearless. She envied that. "Mom," he called, not looking up, "how do you spell adventure?" She smiled softly. "Idventure." He scribbled it at the top of his page with serious care. "Thanks." She stood in the doorway watching him. He was everything she had fought for, everything she had stayed silent for. And now he was the reason she couldn't stay silent any longer. By noon, she found herself at Rosa's again. The bakery was warm and bustling, the air thick with cinnamon and vanilla and fresh baked bread. Rosa waved her over from behind the counter with flour on her cheek and a towel over her shoulder. "You look like you've swallowed a piano." Clara sat at the corner table. "I need your advice." Rosa poured her coffee without asking and joined her. "That's either the best or worst sentence of my week. Let's go." Clara didn't know how to say it at first. The words stuck. "I saw him yesterday," she said finally. "Ben. In the shop." Rosa's eyebrows lifted. "And he knows. About Noah." Rosa put her coffee down slowly. He figured it out. Someone sent him the birth certificate, just like they sent me. Rosa's voice was sharp. "The same person, I think so. Same timing, same message." Rosa leaned back, her jaw tight. "So what now?" He wants to know him. "Noah. Are you going to let him?" Clara stared out the window. "That's what I came here to ask you." Rosa's tone softened. "What do you want, Clara?" She exhaled. I want Noah to have the truth. I want to stop waking up with a weight on my chest. I want to stop being afraid of Elaine and Camille and everything that used to define my life." And Ben Clara hesitated. "I don't know who he is anymore. But yesterday, he looked like a man trying to fix something he didn't know he broke." Rosa nodded slowly. "You said once that you'd tell Noah when he started asking." "Well, honey, he's asking." Clara closed her eyes, heart thudding. "What if I tell him and it destroys everything?" Rosa leaned in her voice, gentle. "What if you don't, and that destroys him later?" That night, Clara waited until Noah was tucked in, until the house was quiet except for the ticking of the clock in the hallway and the faint chirp of crickets outside. She sat at the edge of his bed, smoothing his blanket. "Noah," she whispered. He stirred. "Can I tell you something? Something important." He rolled over his sleepy eyes, trying to focus. "Is it bad?" he asked. "No," she said, brushing his hair back. "It's just something I should have told you a long time ago." He sat up a little, blinking. She swallowed. Her heart felt like it was about to burst out of her chest. "Do you remember how you've asked about your dad?" He nodded slowly. "Well," she said carefully, "I want you to know that your dad wasn't just someone I used to know. He's someone who's still around. He just didn't know you existed." Noah stared at her. "What do you mean?" Clara's throat tightened. "I mean, I didn't tell him. When I found out I was having you, I didn't tell him. It was complicated and I was scared and I thought I was doing the right thing." Noah was quiet, processing. "Is he a bad guy?" he asked finally. She shook her head. "No, he's not. He's a good man, and he was surprised when he found out. But he wants to meet you." Noah looked down at his blanket, tracing the edge with his finger. "Did he want me?" Her heart broke. She cupped his face, kissed his forehead. "Sweetheart, if he had known. I believe with everything in me that he would have been there. He didn't know. That's the truth." Noah didn't cry. He didn't smile either. He just nodded like something had been rearranged inside him. "Can I meet him?" he asked quietly. Clara felt tears sting her eyes. "If you want to." Noah's voice was small. "I think I do." Later that night, Clara sat on the porch again. The stars were out this time, clear and bright. She picked up her phone, scrolled until she found Ben's name. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Then she typed, "He knows. He wants to meet you." The reply came faster than she expected. "When and where I'll be there." Clara looked up at the sky, at the endless dark stitched with light. A chapter of her life had just turned. But it was Noah's story now, too. And this was the page where everything would start to change. Clara sat in the front seat of her car outside the town library, fingers drumming nervously on the steering wheel. Her heart beat in an unsteady rhythm. Noah was in the back seat, clutching his drawing pad with both hands, his legs swinging just a little slower than usual. He hadn't said much all morning. She turned to look at him. "You okay?" He nodded, eyes down. "What if he doesn't like me?" Clara reached back, cupping the side of his face gently. "Sweetheart, that's not even possible." He gave a small, uncertain smile. Okay. Ben had chosen the library garden courtyard. Neutral ground. Public, quiet, safe. Clara had agreed because she didn't want their first meeting surrounded by the buzz of town gossip or the pressure of a family dinner table. This wasn't a reunion. It was a beginning. She stepped out and opened Noah's door. "Ready?" Noah nodded, sliding out slowly. They walked together toward the gate, the gravel crunching under their feet. Clara spotted Ben first. He was sitting on a wooden bench beneath the shade of an old sycamore, hands clasped, suit jacket, off sleeves rolled. Nervous. She paused. He stood when he saw them. His eyes locked on Noah. And something in his face cracked. Noah froze beside her, clutching her hand a little tighter. Clara leaned down. "You want me to stay close?" He nodded. They stepped forward together. Ben swallowed hard, his voice catching. "Hi, Noah." Noah glanced up at Clara, then back at him. "Hi." Ben crouched slightly to be more level with him, but not too close. He was learning the distance. I'm really glad to meet you. I've been hoping for this since I found out about you." Noah blinked. Did you really not know? Ben's eyes filled. "No. And I'm so sorry for that. If I could go back, I would have done everything differently." Noah nodded slowly. "Do you like dragons?" Ben let out a stunned breath, then smiled. "I do, especially the kind that breathe fire and fly over cities." Noah's eyes widened. "That's my favorite kind too." Clara watched them, arms folded loosely. She didn't say a word. Ben gestured to the bench. "Want to sit and show me what you're drawing?" Noah hesitated, then handed over the pad and slid onto the bench beside him. Ben took the sketchbook like it was holy. His hands trembled slightly as he flipped through the pages filled with dragons and castles and words spelled with determination. "This is amazing," he said. "You're really talented." Noah beamed, chest rising a little taller. "Thanks. I made that one for Mom's birthday." Clara gave him a soft smile. "It's framed in the kitchen." Ben looked up at her. Gratitude. Guilt. Awe. She nodded once, letting him have the moment. They spent nearly an hour there, talking, laughing. At one point, Noah got up and picked a dandelion puff from the grass and handed it to Ben. "Make a wish." Ben hesitated, then closed his eyes. Clara didn't ask what the wish was. She already knew. Later, walking back to the car, Noah was quiet again, but different this time. Reflective. Not anxious. Clara opened the door for him, then felt a presence behind her. "Ben." "Thank you," he said, voice low. "I didn't do it for you." "I know. But still, thank you." She looked at him. Really looked. There was a weariness in his face she hadn't noticed before. And maybe that's what forgiveness sometimes looked like, a tired man learning how to make something right, even if it came too late. "He wants more time," she said quietly. "I can see it already." Ben nodded. "Anything. Whatever you think is right." Clara studied him. "You have a lot to prove, Ben. To both of us." He met her eyes. "I know." Clara walked around to her side of the car, hand on the door, then paused. "If you hurt him," she said without turning, "you don't get another chance." "I won't," Ben said firm. "Never again." She got in and started the car. As she pulled away, she glanced in the rear-view mirror. Ben stood alone by the gate, still holding the dandelion. That night back at home, Clara tucked Noah into bed. "Did you like him?" she asked, brushing his curls off his forehead. Noah shrugged. "He's different than I thought. In a good way, I think so." He paused. "Do you love him?" The question hit like a wave. Clara sat down on the edge of the bed. "I used to, but not now." She took a breath. "I don't know what I feel, Noah. But I do know I've always loved you. More than anything." He leaned into her small arms around her waist. "I know." When he finally drifted off to sleep, Clara stayed a while longer, watching the rise and fall of his breath. The house was quiet, but her heart wasn't. Later, just before bed, her phone buzzed. A message. "Thank you for today. I don't deserve it, but I won't waste it." Clara stared at the screen, fingers hovering. She typed back, "This isn't about what you deserve. It's about what he needs. Don't forget that. She turned off the light and climbed into bed. Tomorrow would be harder, because one meeting turns into questions, and questions always lead to more truth. Ready or not, it was time to face the next layer. The next morning, Clara opened the shop an hour earlier than usual. She didn't expect many customers at that hour, not in a town like Marion, but she needed the space, the quiet, the ritual of arranging petals and pruning stems to calm the storm spinning in her chest. She had slept, but not well. Her dreams had been scattered memories and moments tangled like Ivy Ben's smile from years ago, Noah's little hand in hers, and Elaine's cold voice echoing from the past. The bell above the door chimed unexpectedly. She turned. It wasn't a customer. It was Camille. Clara froze, pruning shears in one hand, a cluster of baby's breath in the other. Camille stood confidently in the entryway, wearing a white coat belted at the waist, her hair perfectly set. She looked out of place among the blooms and wooden floors and clay pots like porcelain in a barn. Clara set down the shears. "You're early for a confrontation." Camille tilted her head. "That's not why I'm here." Clara raised an eyebrow. "No. Then let me guess. You're here for roses and redemption." Camille gave a tight smile. "I'm here because I know." Clara didn't flinch. "Know what? That Ben has a son. That the son is yours. And that he's been seeing him." Clara's pulse slowed, cold and calm. "And how did you come by that information? I saw the messages. On his phone." "He left it on the table when he went to shower." Camille walked toward the counter. "At first I thought it was a mistake, a scam. But then I saw the photo." Clara's breath caught. "He took a picture of the boy," Camille said. "You must have seen it. The one where he's drawing on the bench. Ben looks like he's about to cry." Clara nodded slowly. "That's Noah." Camille's eyes flickered. "He looks like Ben." "Exactly like him." There was a pause, a long, aching stretch of silence between two women who had built walls on opposite sides of the same wound. "What do you want?" Camille Clara asked softly. "I want to know why I was the last to find out." Her voice broke just a little. "I want to understand how the man I've been engaged to for almost 2 years has been building a secret life across the street, one that includes a child." Clara's voice stayed even, because it's not a secret life. It's the life that was taken from me. Camille blinked. "Are you trying to punish him?" "No," Clara said sharply. "But if I were, I'd be doing a better job." Camille's composure slipped for a second. She looked down, then back up, her voice brittle. "Do you love him?" Clara didn't answer right away. The question cracked something she'd spent months patching together. "I don't know," she said at last. "I loved the man he was before he left, before his mother buried me with silence and threats. I loved the man who used to fix the sink in our first apartment with one hand and hold me with the other. But I don't know the man who stood at your side at that wedding. And I don't know the man who let 9 years pass before asking a single question." Camille stepped back. "Then why let him into your son's life now?" Clara's jaw tightened. "Because my son deserves truth. He deserves to know who he came from, even if it's messy, even if it hurts." Camille crossed her arms. "And what if I ask Ben to walk away from all of it?" Clara walked around the counter, closing the space between them. "Then I'll tell Noah the truth, that his father had a second chance and chose not to take it." Camille didn't move. "Is that the man you want to marry?" Clara asked, voice steady. "One who runs from the hardest truth of his life, because it's inconvenient for yours?" Camille stared at her eyes, wet now. No mascara smudging, just raw, quiet heartbreak. "I loved him," Camille whispered. "I still do. But I don't think I'm the woman he comes home to anymore. Not in his mind." Clara exhaled the weight between them, pressing in from all sides. "You don't have to stay in a story that no longer fits," she said, gentler now, no matter how perfect it looked on paper. Camille held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded once. "I'm not the villain," she said quietly. "I never said you were." Camille turned to leave, her heels clicking softly on the wooden floor. At the door she paused. "Tell Noah. He's lucky to have you." And then she was gone. Clara stood still in the quiet, the scent of fresh eucalyptus rising around her, the morning sun creeping in through the glass. Everything was shifting. Later that evening, after Noah was asleep, Clara stood on the back porch, arms wrapped around herself, watching clouds drift low across the moon. A soft knock at the front door startled her. She stepped back inside, heart already guessing. Ben. She opened the door to find him standing there, shoulders tense, eyes red. "I just came from Camille's," he said. "I know," Clara replied. "She came here first." He nodded slowly. She gave back the ring. Clara didn't react. "I didn't ask her to," Ben added. "But she saw what I hadn't had the courage to say out loud." Clara leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "She said something," Ben continued. "Something that's stuck in my head. She said, 'You're already living somewhere else. You just haven't admitted it yet.'" "And where are you living?" Ben Clara asked. He looked at her straight through her voice, low and certain. "With you. Every time I walk past this house, every time I see Noah's face. I don't know how to go back to the life I had when the one I lost is right in front of me." Clara's chest rose sharply. "You don't get to say that just because you're hurting." "I'm not saying it because I'm hurting," he said. "I'm saying it because I'm awake." The silence stretched again. Ben stepped back. "I'm not asking for anything tonight. I just needed you to know." Clara nodded once, then slowly closed the door behind him. She didn't lock it. Not yet. It started with an envelope. No stamp, no return address, just Clara's name, written in elegant cursive on the front, tucked into the slot of her flower shop's door, one crisp October morning. She stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of thick cream paper. The ink smelled faintly like lavender. "There's more to the story. Ask for the records at St. Eleonora's, room 417, and follow the name Meredith Lane." Clara's breath caught. St. Eleonora's was the hospital she'd given birth in. Room 417? That was the administrative wing, where she'd waited for hours, sobbing after Elaine told her Ben had already moved on and didn't want to see her again. Meredith Lane. She'd never heard that name before. By noon, Clara was standing in front of the hospital's aging stone exterior, her palms cold, despite the mild weather. The place hadn't changed much, same ivy crawling up the side, same rusted railings near the entrance. Inside, she asked for room 417. The nurse on duty blinked, then nodded. "You'll want records. 4th floor. End of the hallway." Clara walked slowly, her heels clicking against the linoleum. Every step sent a memory back to the surface. Ben pacing in the waiting room. The soft, hollow cry of Noah the first time she held him. The way Elaine's words had landed like knives in her ears. "Ben wants nothing to do with this. If you care about him at all, you'll disappear." Now here she was, walking through the same halls, with a name in her hand and a weight in her chest. At the records desk, she asked softly, "Do you have anyone named Meredith Lane in your system?" The woman behind the desk typed for a long time, then looked up slowly. She was head of patient administration, retired 2 years ago, but we still have her files. Are you a patient? Clara hesitated, then nodded. I gave birth here 9 years ago. My name is Clara Dawson. I believe there's something missing from my file. The woman tilted her head. You'll need to file a request, but let me check something. She disappeared into the back. 10 minutes passed. Then she returned holding a thick folder. Clara took it with shaking hands. Inside were pages she remembered: intake forms, birth certificate signatures. But one stood out. A signed authorization to remove Ben's name from the birth certificate. Only, it wasn't Clara's signature. Her breath stopped. The handwriting was neat, feminine, almost identical to hers, but it wasn't hers. At the bottom was a stamp processed by M. Lane. Clara looked up. This is forged. The woman behind the desk frowned. If you suspect fraud, you'll need to speak to legal. But if that's not your signature, Ms. Dawson, someone went to a lot of trouble. Clara closed the folder and held it to her chest. Everything in her body felt numb. Outside, she dialed Ben's number with fingers that barely moved. He picked up on the first ring. I need to see you, she said. Now. 20 minutes later, they sat in her shop. She laid the folder on the table and slid it toward him. He opened it slowly. Clara watched his face shift. His brow furrowed, then lifted, then collapsed into disbelief. That's not your handwriting. No, it's not. Ben's hands clenched the folder. Meredith Lane, my mother's assistant. She was her shadow for years, handled everything for her charity events board meetings, even hospital donations. Clara nodded, tears burning behind her eyes. Your mother erased you, she whispered. And she did it through someone she trusted. Ben sat back, stunned. Why would she? To protect your reputation, to get me out of the picture, to control the story. Ben shook his head, anger flickering under his skin, but not loud, not explosive, just deeply, bitterly betrayed. She said she'd leave it alone, that she'd stopped meddling. Clara looked at him, voice trembling. She never stopped. Ben stood pacing, then stopped in front of the window. I need to talk to her. No. Clara rose, too. That's not what this is about. This is about Noah, about what he deserves to know. You already missed 9 years. Are you going to waste more chasing ghosts? Ben turned to her, his eyes wild. What do you want me to do? She took a deep breath. Fight for the truth. But not for revenge. For your son. For yourself. He nodded slowly, breathing hard, his hands still clenched. Clara stepped closer. This is your turning point, Ben. Choose who you're going to be now, not who she told you to be. And for the first time since he walked back into her life, Ben looked like a man who was ready to choose. The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of quiet knocking. It wasn't rushed or frantic. Just soft, steady taps against the front door, like whoever stood there wasn't sure if they should be. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, padded barefoot across the wooden floor, and opened the door. Ben stood in the morning light, a folder in one hand, his jaw tight. Clara stepped aside wordlessly, and he entered, eyes low, body tense. He looked like a man who hadn't slept, like a man who'd spent the night walking in circles through memories and regrets. I went to see her, he said, without needing to explain who. Clara closed the door gently behind them, and Ben set the folder on the kitchen table. She denied it at first, said it was done for my protection, said I would have ruined everything if I'd stayed with you. Clara's chest tightened. Did she admit to forging the documents? Ben gave a bitter laugh. Not in those words. But she said Meredith Lane was handling it like always. She said I should be thankful. Clara sat down. Her hands were cold again. Ben! She called you a threat, he said, voice cracking. Said you manipulated me, that you trapped me, that you used the baby to try and hold on. Clara's throat burned. She said that before, too. Right after I gave birth. He looked at her slowly. You were alone, and I let you be. No, she said quietly. She made you believe I left. Ben pulled out the document, the forged removal form, and laid it between them. She stole almost a decade from us, he said. And I let her. Clara couldn't speak. Her heart felt like it was splintering piece by piece. I told her I'm done, he said. With the trust, with the company, with the estate. I told her I'm staying here. Clara's eyes lifted. You left everything. He nodded. What good is it if I can't sleep at night, if my own son doesn't know who I am? She searched his face for hesitation, for performative remorse, but what she saw instead was rawness, real, unpolished, painful truth. Ben stepped closer. I'm not asking for you to take me back. I know I have a mountain to climb before I can earn back your trust or Noah's. But I want to start. I want to do something real with whatever time we have left. Clara blinked, hard tears forming. You don't just get to rewrite the story. I know. But Noah... She swallowed. He needs steady. He needs consistent. Not another promise that disappears. I'll show up, Ben said, voice firm. Even if you never open the door again, I'll show up. Silence stretched between them, thick and humming. Clara stood, walked to the window. Outside, the flower beds shimmered under the early frost. The season was changing again. She could feel it in her bones. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I. I don't want to hurt him. I won't let that happen. She turned back to him. Then it's not about you and me anymore. It's about what's best for him. Ben nodded. That's all I want. A long pause. Then can I see him? He asked. Clara nodded once. He's still asleep. Give it an hour. Ben exhaled, visibly shaking. I'll wait. She looked at him for a long moment. Then quietly she set a second cup on the table and filled it with coffee. He sat across from her. And for the first time in 9 years they shared a quiet morning, not as lovers, not as enemies, but as two people beginning again, this time with nothing to hide. Noah bounded into the kitchen an hour later, rubbing sleep from his eyes, his curls a mess, and his pajama shirt half tucked. He stopped short when he saw Ben sitting at the table. Clara held her breath. Ben smiled gently. Morning, bud. Noah looked between his mom and the man who'd slowly begun to fit into the spaces of his life. You're still here, he said, surprised. I told you I'd be around more. Noah slid into the seat across from him, reaching for a slice of toast Clara had just set out. Mom makes good toast. But you probably don't know how to cook. Ben grinned. You're not wrong. I burn water. Clara chuckled under her breath, and something about the sound made Ben glance at her with that quiet kind of softness, grateful and a little stunned. Like every normal moment with them was still a miracle. Noah bit into the toast, then spoke with his mouth full. Can we go to the park later? Ben looked at Clara for permission. She gave a small nod. Sure, Ben said. After school, Noah smiled. Cool. The boy got up and walked toward his room, already narrating to himself about dragons and playground battles. Ben watched him go, his face tight with emotion. Clara poured herself a second cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. It's happening. Ben looked over. What is... You're becoming his dad? Ben didn't answer. He just stared at his coffee like it was a prayer he didn't know how to finish. That afternoon, Clara was closing up the shop when the door opened again. It was Rosa. She didn't look like herself. Her curls were pinned too tight, her coat rumpled. She walked straight to the counter and dropped a stack of manila envelopes onto the wood. "What's this?" Clara asked. Rosa's eyes were serious. "Evidence." Clara furrowed her brow. "Of what I did some digging," Rosa said. "I used to work with a reporter at the Marion Gazette. I asked her to run a background search on Meredith Lane Elaine's assistant." Clara slowly opened the first envelope. Inside were photos, documents, emails. One in particular made her blood run cold. A scanned memo dated exactly 1 week after Clara gave birth, signed by Meredith Lane, addressed to a private notary confirming the removal of Ben's parental rights. "She forged more than just your signature," Rosa said. "She filed legal documents to block Ben from ever being notified." Clara's voice dropped. She covered every possible path back to him. Rosa nodded grimly. Elaine paid her off. And not just once. There's a financial trail. Donations to Meredith's sister's nonprofit. A sudden trip to Italy, all within the same 6 months. Clara gripped the edge of the counter. This is criminal, and it can't be buried anymore." Ben walked in just then, holding Noah's jacket. He stopped cold when he saw Rosa, the envelopes, the look on Clara's face. "What is it?" Clara looked up at him, then handed him the memo. He read it. Quietly. Slowly. His jaw clenched. Rosa watched them both, then took a careful step back. "I'm here if you need anything. But I think this next part, it has to come from you two." She left the bell jingling softly behind her. Ben set the paper down. "She stole my son from me." "Yes," Clara said. "And now we have proof." He ran a hand through his hair, the weight of it all crashing over him. "We could take this to court," he whispered. "Expose everything." Clara shook her head. "Not yet. We don't do this for revenge, remember?" Ben met her eyes. "Then what do? We protect Noah. And we make sure the story that's told from here on out is the truth." He nodded, but his hands trembled. "I don't know if I can look my mother in the eye again." "You won't have to," Clara said. Not alone. They stood in the quiet, the shop bathed in golden light from the setting sun. It was the first time in years they had stood on the same side of something no longer buried in what-ifs or broken pieces, but rising with the truth in their hands. Clara stepped closer. "You asked me what I wanted from all this," she said softly. "Here it is. I want peace. I want a life where Noah never has to wonder why someone disappeared. And I want you to stop looking backward and start showing up for what's right in front of you." Ben swallowed hard, then nodded. "I'm ready," he said. And this time, Clara believed him. Clara sat on the porch swing, Noah curled beside her with his head resting on her lap. The sun was beginning to dip behind the trees, turning the sky soft with streaks of coral and lavender. She ran her fingers gently through his hair, each motion grounding her, steadying her thoughts as they swirled like leaves in the wind. Ben stood in the doorway, watching them quietly. He didn't want to interrupt. Moments like this didn't need words. They needed time, reverence, and stillness. Clara finally looked up, her gaze catching his. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. He fell asleep after the park. Said the swings wore him out. Ben stepped outside and lowered himself onto the step. "I was thinking about tomorrow." Clara sighed, already knowing where this was going. "You're sure you want to go through with it?" He turned toward her. "We have the documents, the signatures, the timeline. Rosa's reporter friend says she'll publish the piece next week. We can file an official report before then. It's not about punishment, Clara. It's about truth." She studied him for a moment. His face wasn't just determined, it was stripped of pretense. For the first time in a long time, she couldn't see the boy he once was, only the man he was choosing to be. "I just don't want it to turn into a circus," she murmured. "It won't," he promised. "I spoke to my lawyer this morning. Quiet filing, sealed documents, no interviews. Just accountability." She glanced down at Noah, who murmured something in his sleep, his hand twitching gently. "He's the only one I care about protecting," she said softly. "I know." A pause. "Clara?" She looked up again. "I need to ask you something. Not about us. About me. About where I fit. If I fit." Her heart clenched. She knew the question before he even finished it. "I'm not asking for joint custody. I'm not trying to force anything. I just..." He exhaled slowly. "I want to be his dad. Officially. I want my name on the birth certificate. I want to be able to pick him up from school without having to explain why I exist." Clara looked away, the weight of his words sinking deep. "He already calls you that," she whispered. "Dad? Even when you're not around?" Ben blinked hard, trying to hold himself steady. "Does he? Every time he draws you, he labels the picture. DAD. He turned his head towards the yard, swallowing down emotion. The leaves rustled in the trees like they were listening too. "I'll think about it," Clara said after a long beat. He nodded. "That's all I ask." Inside, the phone rang. Clara stood carefully lifting Noah in her arms. "Can you grab that?" Ben ducked inside, answering with a quiet Dawson residence. He listened, then froze. Clara stepped in behind him, sensing the shift in his posture. "Who is it?" she asked. Ben held out the receiver. "It's her." Clara felt her stomach drop. "Elaine." She took the phone, slowly placing it against her ear. "Hello," a beat, then her voice cool, calculated, but strained. "Clara, I suppose congratulations are in order. You've done what you always wanted, torn everything apart." Clara's voice was calm. "No, Elaine. I'm putting things back where they belong." A soft laugh on the other end. "You think Ben won't resent you for this? For dragging his family name through the dirt? He's not choosing a name," Clara replied. "He's choosing his son." Elaine's voice sharpened. "You've always been beneath him. You know that, don't you?" Clara's spine straightened. "No, but you always feared I wasn't." Silence. Then Elaine's tone shifted, just slightly. A flicker of something Clara couldn't quite place. "You could have left it alone. We were all fine, living our lives." "You stole mine," Clara said quietly. "And his. And Noah's. But not anymore." Another pause. "Then you'll regret this." "I already did," Clara said, steady and firm. "For 9 years." She hung up without waiting for a response. Ben stood in the doorway watching her, his expression unreadable. "She's rattled," Clara said softly, walking past him toward Noah's room. Ben followed. "She sounded scared," she added. "She should be," Ben said. "Not of court, not of the press, but of finally being seen for who she is." Clara laid Noah gently in bed, pulling the blankets up to his chin. He stirred, smiled in his sleep, then turned onto his side. Ben lingered at the doorway. "She'll try something," he said. "Let her," Clara replied. "We're not the ones hiding anymore." Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of pine and soil, and something new, something honest. It smelled like change. It had been 2 weeks since the report went public. No headlines, no TV drama. Just a quiet article in the Marion Gazette titled "Buried Truth: How Power, Silence, and Forgery Altered a Child's Life." Clara read it in her kitchen alone, with her tea, the morning sun catching on the rim of her mug. The byline didn't mention names, but the details were unmistakable. The anonymous mother, the powerful matriarch, the forged documents, and the man who finally broke away from it all. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. Airing something that had rotted too long in the dark. Ben had read it too. She knew because he hadn't called that day. He'd come in person. He arrived at her shop just after closing, hair damp from the rain, his hands tucked into his coat pockets. He didn't speak right away, just looked at her quiet and searching. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "I am." For the first time in a long time. They stood there between the scent of eucalyptus and fading roses. "She hasn't spoken to me since Ben said, and I'm not sure I want her to." Clara set down the ribbon she'd been tying and met his eyes. "That's her choice, not your burden." Ben stepped closer, then paused, like he still wasn't sure he had permission to take up space. "There's something else," he said, his voice low. "I filed the petition." Clara blinked. "You mean I'm on Noah's birth certificate now?" Her hand went to her mouth. "It's done." Ben nodded. "It's legal. I'm his father in name and in fact." Tears pressed hard against her eyes, but she didn't cry. "Not yet." "He should be the first to know," she said, her voice breaking a little. "I already told him." Clara looked up, startled. He said, "That makes sense. I already knew." Ben smiled, full and soft. Then he asked if I was going to help him build the greenhouse behind the shop like we talked about. Clara laughed, the sound catching in her throat. "He's something else. He's yours," Ben said. Then after a pause, "Ours." They stood for a long time in the silence that wasn't silence at all. Finally, Ben spoke again. "I'm not staying in Marion. Not forever. But I'm not leaving either. I'm building something small, a design studio out by Meadow Creek, close enough to stay in his life, far enough to give you space." Clara nodded slowly. "That sounds like the kind of boundary that comes from love, not guilt. I owe you more than I can say." "No," she said firmly. "You owe him now? And yourself? Not me." He stepped forward. "Still, I need to say thank you. For what? For not giving up. On your own. On him. On truth." She looked down, then said softly, "I almost did. So many times." Ben touched her arm. "Just briefly. Just enough." "But you didn't," he whispered. That night, Clara sat in Noah's room while he colored. The floor was covered in little scraps of paper and crayon shavings. He was humming a tune she didn't recognize, his tongue poking out of the corner of his mouth as he concentrated. "Hey, buddy," she said gently. He looked up, bright-eyed. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. What do you think about this whole new chapter, having your dad in your life? I mean," Noah thought for a second, then shrugged in that deeply honest way only children could. "It feels like how it's supposed to be." Clara smiled. "Does it feel weird? A little," he admitted. "But the good kind of weird, like when you find something you forgot you lost." She looked at him, so small and wise. "Are you happy?" she asked. He nodded. "Yeah. Do you think you'll still love me the same now that you've got both of us?" Noah scrunched his face. "That's not how love works, Mom. You don't get less of it just 'cause someone else shows up." Clara laughed, tears filling her eyes. Later that week, the three of them stood in the backyard behind the shop. It was chilly, but the kind of crisp that made your lungs feel clean. They marked the edges of the soon-to-be greenhouse with string and wooden stakes. Ben held the blueprint, while Noah held a plastic hammer, eager to help with anything that looked remotely important. Clara watched them from a distance, arms crossed over her chest, the breeze tugging at her sleeves. This wasn't a perfect ending. There were still things to heal, wounds that might never fully scar over. But it was honest. It was theirs. Ben walked over, brushing dirt off his jeans. Once it's done, we'll fill it with sunflowers and basil. That's what Noah picked. Bold choices? Clara smiled. He said basil smells like hugs. She laughed. That's exactly what it smells like. Ben looked at her for a long moment. We'll take it slow, he said. I don't want to force anything, I know, she said. And just like that, the wind shifted again. A few days later, Clara opened the shop to find something taped to the glass door. A child's drawing. 3 stick figures, 1 small, 2 taller, all holding hands in front of a big square labeled greenhouse. Underneath it, in lopsided handwriting, My Family. Clara pressed her palm to the glass. No fireworks, no dramatic music, just a quiet, ordinary miracle. And sometimes that's the most beautiful love story of all.